Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto was born with the power to analyze the bodies of every human in the world. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Guo Academy was a seemingly ordinary school located in the midst of an ordinary town, but not everything was the way it seemed. In the recently turned co-ed school, shadowy figures and hidden activities were out and about, and the main student body was none the smarter. In the normal teenagers' eyes, their school was as ordinary as they came, just a learning facility filled with hormonal teenage boys trying to get into the girls' pants, and that saved them a lot less headaches. But even in the normal student body, there was one individual who appeared to be a loner, but a silent hero in his own right. Uzumaki Naruto had enrolled in the Kuo Academy since it first started to grant male students admission, and since then he had appeared to be one of the more mysterious people of the school. No one had ever seen him talk or associate with other students. Whenever he was in school he would stay away from others and silently studied his courses at the back of classrooms. The young blonde man was not ugly or repulsive or anything, far from it in fact. Many girls in the school considered Naruto to be a very handsome man that they wouldn't mind discovering on their own, but even when beautiful girls approached him, Naruto just ignore or walk away from them. But his bad boy and isolationist attitude kept him on the radar of many female students of the school, and he grew to be one of the most popular boys, much to his own annoyance. It did not help Naruto that he was also the top-ranked student in the school, having achieved top marks in every single subject, which made many of his male classmates jealous of him. But there was a side to Uzumaki Naruto that none of his classmates knew about. Class took longer than usual today, thought Naruto as he ran down a street in the midst of the busy downtown area of his town. I hope they are all okay. The blonde teenager was dressed in his usual school uniform, which consisted of a black blazer with white accents, a white long-sleeved dress shirt with a black ribbon on the collar, matching black pants, and brown dress shoes. It was obvious that Naruto's uniform had seen better days, but he couldn't care less about it at the moment and continued his sprint down the road. Naruto finally made it to his destination, which was a large open area under a freeway overpass. It was a common area for countless homeless people to settle at nights, and it had become one of Naruto's most frequented places. Since he could remember, Naruto could always look at a person and see what kind of body he or she had. It was as if someone had planted the blueprint of every single human being into his brain, and he could point out exactly where people had injuries of diseases. The young man didn't need X-rays or CT scans to see what was going on in one's body. Somehow his mind would already know what was wrong, his eyes could pinpoint exactly where, and he could operate on their bodies in order to heal them of their sickness. Naruto once cured a homeless man of appendicitis using nothing more than a steak knife and some sleeping pills. His incisions were accurate to the point where a doctor could scan the man's body and find that he had just gone under surgery operated by a very skilled surgeon. Ever since Naruto found that his powers could help so many people who could afford medical insurance or healthcare, he decided to go down to the overpass every day to treat people who need his help. The blonde had been visiting many homeless populations for a year already, and he was beginning to feel that he could make a difference by healing one man at a time. "Oh!" cried a middle-aged woman as she cradled a little boy to her chest. "Thank God you are here, Naruto-san." Naruto quickly ran over to his desk, which was one he picked up in some random landfill and was still intact. "Please, bring the boy over here." The woman ran over to the desk and placed her son on it as tears pooled in her eyes. It was obvious to others that the woman was homeless and she had no way to get her son medical attention right away, so she brought him to their local hero. Fortunately for the woman, the overpass was not crowded with people like usual, and the few other patients agreed to let her son see Naruto first since they were not having any serious troubles. "Please, can you save him?" cried the woman as she knelt down next to the desk in anguish. Naruto gave the woman a kind smile and patted her on the shoulder. "Ma'am, I promise that I will do everything I can to save your son." The blonde's words seemed to have an effect, seeing that the woman calmed down slightly and allowed the young doctor to diagnose his patient quietly. Naruto's eyes scanned over the boy's frail body as his hands pressed on various places to check on his organs. In his mind, Naruto already knew what was wrong with the boy. He had pneumonia, but thankfully it was not very severe. The boy just started to have his fever and was having trouble coughing, which were symptoms that matched up with Naruto's mental answer. "Don't worry ma'am," said Naruto as he pulled a box out of his backpack. "Your son will be fine, thankfully you brought him here quickly and his pneumonia can still be suppressed by using antibiotics." Naruto drew a syringe full of some antibiotics he managed to steal from a local pharmacy and injected it into the boy. "Stay here for the next few hours with him and let me monitor him, but if nothing goes wrong his symptoms should be retracting soon." Naruto handed the woman a piece of paper. This piece of paper lists out the times I will be in this location for the next 2 weeks, and if your son still have problems, please bring him back to me." The woman cried as she hugged her son close to her chest. Thank you so much." Choked out the woman in between quick breaths. "God bless you, Naruto-san." Naruto just smiled back and shook his head. "I make it my responsibility that everyone gets the chance to be treated, you don't have to thank me." The woman gave Naruto a deep bow and wiped away her tears. "You are a saint," she said with a smile. The blonde chuckled and started to settle his things down on his desk. "I'm just a student, ma'am, and regrettably, I'm not a very religious person." The happy mother shook her head. "You have a gift, Naruto-san, and I am sure that God is watching all you are doing." The woman smiled and gave Naruto another bow. "You saved many people in these past months, he must be proud." With that the woman stepped back and rested down on a bench along with her sleeping son, hoping that the medications would really help her son. Naruto smiled as he gestured his next patient to come forward. "God," thought the young man silently. "Faith is a gift that I have yet to receive." After another 6 hours at the overpass, Naruto finally packed up his things and was heading back home. It was not as busy as usual, Naruto only had to treat about 10 patients, but he stayed the full time because he wanted to see if that boy needed any more injections. Fortunately, the boy's condition was getting better and better, and Naruto told the mother that her son should be fine. The overpass Naruto just visited was quite far from his home, and it took him an hour by train to get back to his neighborhood. Naruto was an orphan who was abandoned in Japan when he was very young. His birth parents had died while on a business trip to Japan, and he was left inside an orphanage that took in foreign children until his current parents adopted him into their family. Naruto's blonde hair really stood out in Japan, and many people would wonder where he originated from. But even Naruto didn't know who his birth parents were or where they were from, but he assumed that it was somewhere in Europe. Although it seemed that Naruto was not entirely European, as doctors told his parents that he was half European descent and half Asian descent, indicating that one of his parents might have been Japanese. At the age of 17, Naruto was taller than others in his classes at the height of 6 feet, and his body was much more built than other boys his age. Because of his power to see the makings of each individual human being, Naruto analyzed his own body and figured out ways to hone it to its maximum physical potential. After countless hours in his father's weight room, Naruto had toned his muscles to perfection, and if he ever took his clothes off in front of his fangirls at school, he would be even busier with them. "I'm home," announced the young man happily as he took his shoes off and placed them on the rack. A middle-aged woman with brown hair and red eyes walked up to him. "Welcome home, sweetie, what took you so long today?" This woman was Uzumaki Kurenai, the adopted mother of Naruto and a housewife who took care of her family with love. Naruto grinned and kissed his mother on the cheek. "Sorry Ka-san, but I had to study at school, there is a big test soon." Naruto's parents had no idea that he had been helping the homeless or the fact that he had been stealing from many medical facilities for the past year. Since Naruto's academy records and scores were so good, he used them as a valid excuse for after-school studies. The Uzumaki parents knew that their son was smart but had no idea that he could ace every single subject at school without actually studying for more than an hour. "Don't worry about the boy so much, honey," said a low voice from the kitchen as the mother and son walked in. "He's 17 already, maybe he went on some dates and decided to keep it from us." This was Uzumaki Asuma, the adopted father of Naruto. Asuma was an engineer who worked in a local construction company and was a chain smoker who would stink up the house with his cigarettes. Asuma had a thick layer of black hair and a beard that his wife considered manly and cool. Naruto smiled at his father as his mother sighed. "Naruto, I told you before, no dating before you make it into university." Asuma sighed at his wife and shook his head. "Come on honey, the boy is already 17, don't you think it is time that he gets some experience with girls?" Kurenai have her husband a hard look and placed her hands on her hips. "No dear," exclaimed the woman loudly. "If he slacks off now then he might not make it into one of the good universities." Kurenai looked back at her son seriously. "I will not have some little girl steal my little boy's future away." Naruto sighed but also smiled at his loving parents. "Okay, I'm going to take a shower and go to bed," said the young man as he walked up the stairs. "Good night Ka-san, Tu-san." The blonde stepped into his shower and sighed when the hot water ran down his body, washing away the grime and sweat that had accumulated on his body in the hours he spent under the overpass. Naruto did feel stress and pressure from all the responsibility placed on him, as he was the only man who hundreds of people could get instant medical attention from, and that much pressure to get to anyone. But despite the stress, Naruto loved doing what he was doing, there was nothing like saving someone's life. In his room, Naruto kept many little gifts that his patient have him after he treated them, and he regrettably told his parents that his admirers gave them to him, which caused his mother to go on another one of her rants about not having a girlfriend before university. Honest to himself, Naruto had never really thought about having a girlfriend, mainly because he had different standard of women than other men. Since Naruto's eyes could see the very making of everyone's bodies, he could tell which girls were dieting too much, who had odd proportions because of plastic surgery, and even those who harmed their own bodies. Naruto had yet to find a woman who was just really healthy, who never dieted or even tried to change her body, which he didn't mind seeing that his mother would be against it anyway. It was Naruto's dream to become a doctor, and he had completed all the necessary work in order to make it into a good pre-med school. Opening a clinic used to be Naruto's ideal plan for his future, but now he would rather fly out to many poor places in the world and aid people who would need his help. With his power, Naruto wouldn't need any sort of machines or advanced technology to diagnose people in rural places, so it made him the perfect traveling doctor. I should go get some more antibiotics at the pharmacy tomorrow. Naruto got out of the shower and slipped into his usual sleepwear, which consisted of a simple white t-shirt and a pair of black shorts. It had been a tiring day, and it was true that there was an exam coming up soon, so Naruto needed his rest if he wanted to keep up with his routine. Luckily for the young man, the lessons at school were ridiculously easy, and he could so most of them with his eyes closed, but he would still read up a bit for the exam. "Ani-chan!" cried a sudden squeaky voice as an 8-year-old girl ran into the room with a bright smile on his face. Naruto smiled and let the girl jump into his arms. "Hey, Yuki-chan," replied the older brother as he held the little girl in his arms. Uzumaki Yuki was the biological daughter of the Uzumaki couple, and she had dark brown hair like her mother, but black eyes like her father. Naruto's parents had Yuki when he was 9 years old, and he welcomed the birth of his little sister with open arms. The little girl looked up at her older brother like an idol, and she wanted to be a nurse who would work in her brother's clinic. Yuki was still in elementary school, but she also had good grades and was on a good track on her academic trail. Yuki sat in her brother's lap and looked up at him. "What took you so long to come home? I wanted to play with you." Naruto smiled at his sister tired and kissed her forehead. "Sorry Yuki-chan, but I was studying at school," explained the older brother as Yuki pouted a little. "I'll play with you tomorrow, okay?" The little girl lightly slapped Naruto on his chest. "Fine, but you better come home earlier tomorrow." The blonde chuckled at his dear little sister and nodded. "I promise, now go to bed, you have school tomorrow." Yuki pouted and begrudgingly jumped off of her brother's lap. "Okay, good night, Ani-chan." Naruto smiled as the little girl ran out of the room, she was truly the apple of his eye. The blonde had been taking care of his sister since she was born, not because his parents weren't there for her, but because he wanted to do it. As an older brother, Naruto made sure that his sister was as healthy as she could be and would design a health chart for their mother to follow so she would have a healthy diet. Sometimes Naruto would make some custom bentos for his sister for lunch, and on occasion Yuki would manage to convince him to give her some candy and junk food as well. The blonde lied down on his bed and closed his eyes and thought. "I don't get how some guys at school could be so perverted all the time." Naruto would sometimes run into the infamous perverted trio of Kuo Academy, and he would be disgusted by them every time. If he ever found someone peeking on his mother or sister, Naruto would beat them too within an inch of their lives. The blonde himself was a young man in his prime, and he too had his urges with the opposite sex, but he would never stoop as low as those 3 pathetic horn dogs. "Oh, who cares about them? It's not like I will ever be friends with any of them." If Naruto wanted to, he could have many friends at school, but he just doesn't have time for anyone. Most of his effort was placed towards healing as much people as he could, and the remaining limited brain function was to focus on his family and studying, so Naruto just didn't find the time to make friends. The blonde would like to have a few friends his age so he could talk with, but he would leave that off until he was in university and had more time. "I just want high school to end faster, it's so boring." As if fate was mocking Naruto, his day in school was even more boring than usual. The teacher decided that it was time to review past lesson so the class could refresh their memory before the exam, but Naruto just found it to be useless. The blonde sat in his desk with a book in front of him, but it was not any of his textbooks, it was the Holy Bible. Naruto had never been one to believe in God, but he found the stories in the Bible to be interesting. For some reason, churches and the Bible would offer him comfort and peace, even though he was not baptized. Some giggling behind him broke Naruto out of his concentration, and he peered through the corner of his eyes to see one of the perverted trio giggling to himself. "Why Uma-chan?" muttered a goofy Haidu-say as he looked at some picture on his phone. Naruto shook his head and sighed inwardly at the man. Stupid horn dog. The blonde's usual spot was a window seat that was at the back of the room, and he often enjoyed the beautiful view it offered him of the outdoors. From the height of the classroom, Naruto could see some faraway mountains that almost pierced the sky with their height. It was a beautiful day, and the blue skies were free of any clouds. From where he was, Naruto saw the old schoolhouse, a building that had always intrigued him. The house was far away, but Naruto's eyes caught a pretty shade of red by the window, and it was gone as soon as it appeared. I wonder what that was. The day was finally over, and Naruto enjoyed a nice breath of fresh air as he made his way out of the school. According to his timetable, Naruto didn't have to visit any places today because it was a day he left open so he could spend more time with his family. It has been a while since he went home right after school and looked forward to having a nice home-cooked dinner with his parents and sister. But just as fate would have it, Naruto heard some odd whimpering in a back alley. The blonde walked into the alley and was shocked to see a very sick dog lying on the ground. Well, animals aren't my specialty, but I guess I can give it a try. Naruto ran his hands over the dog and tried to feel if there was anything wrong with the dog's organs, as with it his mind drifted into autopilot. Just like every other time Naruto was troubled with medical problems, time would seem to flow extra fast, and when he was finished with the dog, it was nightfall already. Naruto knew that his parents would be worried about him since he had told them that he would be home early and his sister would be angry that he didn't come home to play with her. The blonde dreaded the conversation in his mind as he pulled out his phone and was about to text his father. Ah! Naruto's eyes widened at the painful cry and he instantly ran to the origin of the scream. The blonde made it to a small park and the scream came from a small area near a large fountain. Much to Naruto's shock, he saw Ise lying in a pool of his own blood. There was a strange woman standing in front of him, dressed in a very revealing manner. Naruto absent-mindedly remarked in his mind that he knew one day the perverts would be killed by some woman, but he ran over to Isei's direction nonetheless. "What the hell are you doing?" cried the blonde as he ran into the scene. Issei looked up at Naruto with weak eyes as blood spilled from his mouth. The woman looked at Naruto and licked her lips. "Why can't a handsome man like you have a sacred gear instead? At least that way I would have enjoyed that stupid date." Naruto deduced that the woman was just crazy, but when he used his eyes to look at her, he was shocked to see that the wings on the woman's back were real. The woman was giving Naruto a strange sensation and left some bad taste in his mouth. Shaking his head of his strange feelings, Naruto looked down at Issei and found that his stomach had been pierced by some sharp object and his stomach acid was beginning to poison him from the inside. "Hold on, Issei, I need to get you to a hospital." Naruto's eyes widened when he saw some sort of blade come towards him and he instantly jumped out of the way. The woman was holding some sort of light in her hands and it was apparently her weapon. Naruto was on guard as the woman walked up to him with a smile on her face and it irritated him to end. The woman charged at him again and Naruto could only dodge as the blade of light threatened to slice his jugular open. "What the hell is your problem?" cried the blonde as he jumped over a fence. The woman slashed through the fence and stared into Naruto's eyes. "Hey, it seems that you have some sort of power yourself too." Naruto knew that he had to find some way to fight back so he could call the police and get help for Issei, so he used his eyes to analyze the woman's body. The blonde found that the woman's left side was more vulnerable than her right and there was an old wound on the left side of her hips. It seemed that the woman's hip was shattered once before and it looked like she was still suffering small amount of pain from it based on how it healed up. But before Naruto could make up his mind, his eyes widened when the woman fired a blade of light straight into his chest. The blonde tried to breathe, but his lungs were punctured from his wound and blood was rapidly seeping into his windpipe. Naruto fell to the ground as his body twitched uncontrollably, the blade was still stabbed into his chest as indescribable pain coursed through his body. The woman stood over Naruto while shaking her head. "If I weren't on a tight schedule I would have gave you a nice night before killing you with it." The woman flew into the sky and vanished as some black feathers hovered down to the ground. "Is this the end?" thought Naruto as his consciousness became fainter as each moment passed. "Why did this even happen? I was just going home for dinner." The images of his parents and sister flashed through his mind as he felt his own blood flow down his body. "I still have so much I want to do." Naruto still wanted to become a doctor, he wanted to help more people, he wanted to see Yuki grow up, he wanted to learn cooking from his mother, he wanted to take his father on a golfing trip, he wanted to find the love of his life, get married and have children. This can't be the end. Just as Naruto's eyes were about to close, he caught the fluttering ends of strand of crimson red hair. "I wasn't summoned here by you," said a melodic voice from above Naruto. "But it seems that I should help you too." Naruto finally blacked out as he fell into a deep slumber. "My son," said a deep voice from all directions as Naruto floated in the midst of nothingness. "This is the official beginning of your journey and I know you will go well." Naruto opened his eyes and saw that from all the darkness that enveloped him, a large origin of light was shining down from above him. "Just as your brother had done before, you will try to bring true peace between humans, devils, and fallen angels." Naruto felt a warm sensation on his right hand and when he grasped his hands closed, he felt that there was some sort of hilt in his hand. "I grant you this weapon and you will bestow your judgment to all those before you as you are a god among men." Naruto stared into the large bright light and felt peculiar warmth spread out his body and a surge of power began to grow at his core. The sunlight broke through the window of Naruto's room and landed on his face. "Where am I?" thought Naruto as he opened his eyes and saw a familiar white ceiling. Was that all a dream? If it was, then how the hell did I get home? The blonde looked around his surroundings and found that he was indeed in his room. Everything looked as he left them and nothing was out of the ordinary. Naruto lifted his hand to rub his chest and found that there was no wound. There was not even a scratch. He used his eyes to scan his body and found that nothing was wrong with him, he was as healthy as ever. The blonde tried to find the surge of power that he felt before, but he found nothing. What the hell happened? Asked the young man to himself as he tried to rub his eyes with both hands, but for some reason his left arm wouldn't budge. Naruto turned his head to look and he was utterly shocked when he saw some strands of red hair sticking out from under the blanket. There was a weight leaning onto his arm and it began to move along with a large part of the blanket. The blonde instantly sat up on the bed and was even more shocked when he saw that he was as naked as he was when he was born. Naruto's eyes were glued to the hump under his blanket as it was sitting up. "Good morning," said a beautiful voice as a beautiful girl emerged from the blanket. Naruto's jaw dropped as he sat motionlessly on his bed. What the hell, the blonde had seen the same woman somewhere before, she was the most popular girl at his school. Ria's Gremory. Ria smiled at the shocked look on Naruto's face as she rested her delicate face on her knees. "Yes, but I am also your master," muttered the girl as she leaned closer to Naruto. "It's nice to officially meet you, Uzumaki Naruto. I am Ria's Gremory, a devil." Naruto's shocked expression didn't change at all throughout her words. "And you are my newest knight." As if Naruto was not troubled enough, his bedroom door suddenly opened. "Naruto, it's time to wake up," said a cheerful Kurenai as she walked into her son's room. Naruto just knew that his ears would be hurting in a few seconds. "Ka-san, calm down and let me explain." Kurenai finally got sight of the whole situation. Her son was in bed with a girl, they were both naked, there were no clothes in sight, and the girl had a satisfied smile on her face. "Oh my god," cried the mother as loud as she could. "My little boy has been defiled." It had been a long time since Naruto felt the need to run away from his room and it felt very foreign to him. The small room with white walls and hardwood floors had been his safe haven since he was a child, it was his personal space and his cool down room, but that no longer felt like the case. The blonde's large queen-size bed was occupied by one of the most beautiful girls he had ever laid eyes on, and his door was blocked by his catatonic mother. Naruto stood in the middle of his room without any idea how he ended up in such an embarrassing situation, while he wondered where in the name of God were his boxers. He never would have imagined that one morning, he would be caught naked in bed with an equally naked woman by his strict mother. The embarrassment was almost overwhelming, and Naruto just wanted to crawl into a hole and hide. Rias looked a little clueless as she smiled at Kurenai. "Good morning, Akasama." While it was a friendly sentiment in Japanese culture to call a friend's mother as mother, Kurenai completely disregarded it and freaked out even more. "Naruto!" cried the furious woman with an evil glare. "What the hell did you do?" Kurenai turned over to Rias and held her fists tightly. "And did you take advantage of my son?" Naruto backed away from his angry mother while waving his hands in the air. "Ka-san, calm down and let me explain," exclaimed the blonde as he tried his best to cover his manhood with his hands. "Oh, who the hell am I kidding, there is no way to explain this." Luckily for Naruto, someone outside the door spoke up. "Ka-chan, what is going on?" asked little Yuki with her cute girly voice. "Is Ani-chan home?" Kurenai quickly jumped out of her son's room and slammed the door closed before her little girl could see inside. "It's nothing," exclaimed the mother a little too loudly. "Your brother just slept in again, just go brush your teeth and get ready for breakfast." "Okay," answered the little girl quietly, wondering what was wrong with her mother. Just as the Yuki made her way into the bathroom, Kurenai ran back into her own room and busted through the master bathroom. "Honey," cried the woman at her husband who was in the shower. "Our son brought a girl home and I think they slept together." Asuma almost tripped inside the shower and dropped the soap on his toes. "What?" Kurenai nodded with a scared expression on her face. "Yes, they were both naked." The father then had a huge grin on his face. "That's my boy, I am so proud." Kurenai just smacked her husband on the face and proceeded to explain to him once again about the dangers of having a girlfriend so soon. All the while, Naruto's face was getting redder and redder because his parents' loud conversation traveled through all walls of the house and the small smile on Ria's face did not help at all. The blonde himself was more perplexed than anyone in the house and he wondered if he really did have sex with Ria's Gremory the previous night. Having sex with a beautiful woman wouldn't be a bad thing at all, and he was slightly proud that he had his first time with the most beautiful woman in school, but he couldn't remember any of it. With a sigh, Naruto went and locked his room door. "Okay, Rias-senpai, care to tell me why you are in my room?" asked the young man, trying his best to not stare at her large and pink dot. What the hell did you mean by master or devil? Ria smiled and crossed her legs over one another. Well, as I said, I am a devil. Naruto looked at the woman as if she was crazy. What are you talking about? The red-haired beauty smiled sweetly at Naruto and stood up. Don't you remember anything about last night? Asked the girl as her delicate fingers traced Naruto's chest. How you were stabbed in the chest by a fallen angel. Naruto's eyes widened as he backed away from the girl. How did you know about my dream? Ria shook her head and walked back closer to Naruto. It was not a dream, everything you saw and experienced yesterday was real. The blonde looked into Ria's soft green eyes as she spoke. You came across Haidu Issei dying on the ground, and when you tried to help him you too were killed by a fallen angel. Naruto's own fingers traced over the wound that was supposed to be on his chest. Issei accidentally summoned through his blood one of my flyers, and I decided to revive both of you. The blonde calmly exhaled and looked directly into Ria's eyes. You are saying that I actually died last night and you are some kind of devil who revived me because of that pervert. Ria's giggled at Naruto's insult to Issei and nodded. Yes, and now you shall devote your life to me, whispered the girl as he hand reached out to caress Naruto's chin while her fingers traced his lips. I am your master, spoke Ria's with her lips dangerously close to Naruto's. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the girl and placed his hands on her shoulders. Okay, listen here lady. Spoke Naruto with iron voice. I don't know what the hell you are on, but stop this bullshit. Ria sighed. I expected you to be skeptical, unlike Issei you are a man of logic and I know this is a hard pill to swallow. The girl walked over to Naruto's desk chair where she placed her clothes and started to dress. But I assure you that everything I have told you is true and I will explain more later on at school. Naruto blushed hard when Ria's bent over to put on her panties while giving him an explicit view of her womanhood and he found covering his manhood with his hands to be increasingly difficult as he watched her cup her into her bra. Come here softly said Ria's as she turned her back at Naruto. Help me clip my bra. Naruto shook his head of his dirty thoughts and walked over with shaky hands. This is the craziest morning ever muttered the young man as he closed Ria's bra while desperately to suppress his obvious arousal that was threatening to poke her lower back. Suddenly someone knocked on the door and Naruto was instantly on guard. Who is it? Ani-chan. Cried little Yuki's voice, which allowed Naruto a surge of relief. Ka-chan says breakfast is ready and wants you and your friend to come down to eat. Naruto resisted the urge to collapse to the ground with embarrassment. Okay, we'll be down in a minute. Your clothes were soaked in blood last night, so I threw them away, said a fully dressed Ria's with a smile on her face. So you should just dress in whatever you have in your closet. Naruto sighed as he hurried to his closest while covering his pride and quickly threw on his spare school uniform. Dressing in front of Ria's felt very weird to Naruto and his hands shook as he pulled up his pants. The blonde never really interacted so closely with any girl before and he was very uncomfortable about having Ria stare at him as he dressed. Ria smiled sweetly again as she opened the door. Shall we go down for breakfast? It smells amazing down there. The blonde sighed and ran his fingers through his hair. Let's just get this over with. It had always been a tradition of the small family to have a big breakfast, so Ria's and Naruto were greeted with a large table filled to the brim with food. Naruto avoided eye contact as he sat down on the dinner table, while Ria's kindly smiled and bowed to his entire family. Yuki, being the little girl she was, smiled back and started to ask Ria's all sort of question, but the one that took the cake was. Are you Ani-chan's girlfriend? Naruto peeked up from his plate and saw the livid expression on his mother's face. Oh, I hope you won't be crying after Ka-san is finished with you, thought the young man as he tried his best to tune out the incoming conversation between his mother and Ria's. How did you do that? Exclaimed Naruto loudly as he and Ria's headed towards the direction of their school. The conversation between his mother and Ria's turned out to be nothing like expected and they actually got along quite well. The strangest part was when his mother asked if she was her son's girlfriend. Ria's had replied that they were only close friends and sleeping together naked was really how teenagers interacted these days and his mother actually bought it. Ria smiled with a wink. I used my powers on your parents and now they won't suspect that you might be hiding a girlfriend from them. Naruto turned a tad serious and crossed his arms together. So you really are a devil. The red-haired beauty smiled and kept her gaze ahead. I know you won't believe me until you've seen some decisive proof, but I can't show you anything here in public. Said the girl before she looked over at Naruto. I will send a messenger over later to you and I will give you your much needed proof. The blonde man sighed and nodded. Sure. The one thing that bothered Naruto the most was not the fact that he was killed the previous night but the strange voice that he heard when he was dying. The voice felt warm and loving, yet extremely powerful. The blonde could recall the voice implying that he was his father and mentioned something about doing something that his brother had done before. Naruto could suspect that he was his biological late father talking to him from the great beyond, but what kind of person was his father before he died? The blonde's mind was filled with unanswered questions, and he knew that he needed to find out the answers to all of them. Naruto also remembered that he had held a sword in his hand while fading away, and it gave him a surge of power that was unlike anything he had felt before. Whatever it was, Naruto intended to find out. "Oh yeah, what happened to that pervert?" asked Naruto curiously. Rias giggled again at Naruto's insult to Issei and just nodded. "He was as injured as you were, so after I revived him I had one of my subordinates take care of him." Rias looked into Naruto's blue eyes with wonder. "I revived Issei because he possesses a power that is quite rare in the world, but when I saw you, I found that you also have a great amount of power inside you." Naruto narrowed his eyes at the young woman. "What do you mean?" Rias smiled. "You know what I mean. I can tell that you've been using your powers for a long time already." Naruto just looked on ahead and remained silent. "But other than that you possess another kind of power, one that you have yet to activate." "What are you talking about?" asked the blonde suspiciously. The beauty just smiled and shook her head. "I'll tell you later when we are in private." Naruto sighed and nodded fine. The blonde took the time to take a good look at the young woman beside him, and he had to admit that she was beautiful. From his eyes, Naruto could see that she was very healthy, her body was in top shape, and she didn't seem to have dieted before. All of Ria's internal organs were in full function, and her brain showed a lot of activity. Overall, Rias was a woman that was exactly Naruto's type, a young beautiful woman who had healthy and treated her body with respect. "Oh my god," cried a random girl as a crowd gathered in front of the school. "Naruto-kun is walking together with Rias Onasama." Naruto honestly didn't realize that they were at the school already and sighed when he saw the shocked looks on the people's faces. There were enough rumors of him floating around the school as it was, and he didn't need people saying that he got together with the most popular girl in school. But even Naruto had to admit that he and Rias stood out like a sore thumb, being two of the few people in the school who were not fully Japanese, and the eccentric red and blonde hair colors really caught people's attention. They look so cute together. "Yeah, Naruto-kun looks so much cooler standing next to Rias senpai. Doesn't Rias senpai look a lot happier than normal? Maybe they are in love." Naruto sighed as he shook his head at the sheer amount of gossip that travels around the school. He was quite positive that by lunchtime, everyone in the school would start saying that he started dating Rias Gremory, and people will start questioning him when they pass in the halls. Naruto had enjoyed his isolationist reputation in school, but it looked like it was not going to last for long. "I'm going to class," said Naruto as he turned away from Rias. "I'll see you later." Rias nodded with a sweet smile. "Sure, I'll send someone over to you soon." The blonde nodded and went on his way to his homeroom, but he couldn't help but turn back and looked at the beautiful woman who had come into his life so strangely. Naruto had never thought or even imagined that something so bizarre would randomly happen to him. The young man was still a skeptic, but he was intrigued by the notion of Rias trying to prove to him that she was in fact a devil, and he had somehow become her slave after she saved his life. With a sigh, Naruto walked into the mid-sized classroom and ignored the fervent gaze of many girls, along with the whispers and giggles that came with it. It was just a physics class, so Naruto could almost entirely tune out the teacher and allow his mind to relax after such a bizarre morning. Even after a year of intense medical adventures with the homeless population of the town, Naruto had to say that the excitement he got from Rias in the morning was the most intense feeling he had ever experienced. The young woman was beautiful, and while she appeared to be innocent and cute, she was also dignified and majestic. There was a sense of pride in Ria's composure, and she displayed an aura of confidence that suggested her sophistication. The image of Ria's naked body was still very vivid in Naruto's mind, and he didn't think it would fade away anytime soon. Ria's was the definition of feminine beauty, and even though Naruto had never really been attracted to any women before, he couldn't help but feel infatuation for her. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," said an old man with a pair of glasses on his face. Naruto smiled and bowed to the man. "Good morning, Kenshin-sensei, how are you this morning?" The teacher smiled and nodded. "It's been good, thank you." Kenshin walked back to behind his desk and clapped his hands together to get the class's attention. "Okay class, take out your textbooks and start doing the questions on page 205. Naruto sighed as he pretended to read from his textbook in his desk. The blonde knew that the teacher would allow him to slack off in class occasionally because he was the top student of the school and had good relations with every teacher that taught him. "I still have to head over to the east end of town today. I haven't been there for a week already, and I know that some are still sick." Some rumbling in front of Naruto had knocked him out of his stupor again, and he looked up to see the pervert trio whispering to each other. Naruto had almost completely forgotten about Issei since he arrived at the school, and the pervert was apparently fine. From what Naruto remembered, Issei was stabbed in his stomach, which made his stomach acid burn him inside out. Based on his condition, Issei should have died from internal bleeding and blood poisoning, but as Naruto scanned his body, the young man was perfectly fine. I know that if last night was real, Issei would have died for sure if he didn't make it to the hospital within 5 minutes, maybe Rias did save us both. Before Naruto knew it, class was already over and the people around him were starting to pack up. The young man sighed and started to clean up his desk as well, but soon a shadow blocked the light from his window. Uzumaki-san said a smooth voice, and Naruto looked up to see Udo Kiba smiling down at him with an extended hand. Rias Butchu sent me here to invite you to our clubroom. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he stood and shook Kiba's hand. I didn't expect you to come get me, Kiba-san. The girls in the class had hearts in their eyes as they stared at the two hottest young men in the school, chatting with each other. But whatever, I look forward to what Rias-senpai has to say to me. Oh, this is heaven. They look alike, both of them have beautiful blonde hair. I really want to join their club. Kiba chuckled at the reaction of the class as he placed his hands in his pockets. Our club is in the old schoolhouse on the edge of campus, but I have one more person to bring with us. Kiba walked over to Issei, who was staring at the girls of the classroom. Issei-san, can you please come with me and Naruto-san? Issei gave Kiba a look before he stood up with a sigh. Sure. What? Cried a random girl in the class, why the hell is that pervert hanging out with Naruto-kun and Kiba-kun? Another girl shook her head violently as she cried out in frustration. Don't hang out with that pervert, Naruto-kun, Kiba-kun. Cried the girl loudly, you'll catch something off him. Issei grunted in annoyance and walked out with Kiba. They are just spouting nonsense. I didn't expect you to revive two evil pieces in one night, but you said one Himejima Keno, one of the two great beauties in the school. Are you sure they are worthy? Rias sighed as she stood in her shower and let the hot water run down her body. Issei possessed some kind of sacred gear that attracted the fallen angels, so I have good faith in his potential, and Naruto possesses a very peculiar gift that will also be useful at times. The Kendo sat down on a chair next to the shower with her legs overlapping one another. Does Naruto-san have a sacred gear as well? The club president nodded from within her shower. I strongly think he does. I felt some sort of power inside him when I revived him yesterday, something I have never felt before, said the beauty softly through the shower curtain. But besides his potential sacred gear, Naruto also has the ability to somehow diagnose people's bodies or something like that. I've only seen him do something akin to that last night. Interesting, muttered Akeno as a soft smile graced her lips. So he has two kinds of power. That's not very common at all. A series of knocking broke the girls out of their conversation, and Akeno stood to greet the people at the door. Kiba stood at the door along with Naruto and Issei, both looking around the Gothic-style room with interest. But while Naruto was busy with the architecture of the place, Issei was staring at the cute white-haired girl sitting on the couch and the gently beauty standing in front of them. Kiba smiled as he gestured to the girl on the couch. This young lady is Taoju Kaneko-san, a first-year student. The man then turned to the lady standing in front of them with a smile. This is Himejima Akeno-san, a third-year student who is our senior. Issei had blush on his face as he bowed to the girls. It's nice to meet you all. Naruto bowed also, but had a blank look on his face. It's a pleasure to meet you both, Akeno-san, Kaneko-san. Kaneko just nodded silently as Akeno walked up to the two boys and bowed. It's nice to meet you too, Naruto-san, Issei-san, said the woman with a kind smile. I welcome you to our club, and as vice president, I hope you enjoy your time here. While Issei spent his time ogling at Akeno's body, Naruto just sighed and ran his fingers through his hair. Sorry Akeno-zero-san, I mean no disrespect, but I am only here because Rias-senpai had told me she had proof of last night's event. Issei immediately looked over at the blonde. Why, you remember it too? Akeno nodded with her perpetual smile. She does, but Butchu is in the shower right now, she will be out shortly. Issei and Naruto both looked towards the classy shower that was rather open at the corner of the room and saw a clear silhouette of Ria's naked body in the shower. The sound of water dripping onto her luscious body filled the room as the smell of sweet shampoo caressed the senses. Naruto looked at the young man standing next to him and was surprisingly annoyed at his perverted expression, and he had to look the other way in disgust. Your perverted look is disgusting. Muttered Naruto as he closed his eyes and crossed his arms. Issei glared over at the blonde and balled his fists up. Shut up, you weirdo. Naruto-senpai is right, spoke a stoic Kaneko as she munched on a piece of chocolate. Your perverted expression is disgusting. Issei grunted in annoyance and stepped back a little with embarrassment, which made Naruto smirk a little. The water suddenly stopped, and after another minute the shower curtain was pulled to the side and revealed a fresh Ria's Gremory in her school uniform. The beauty's hair was still wet, so she held a towel in her hand and gently ran it through her crimson strands. There was something about Ria's hair that Naruto found to be extremely attractive, and its beauty was only enhanced by her gorgeous face. Ria smiled at Naruto sweetly. I'm sorry, but since I stayed over at your place last night, I didn't get a chance to take a shower. Issei's nose flared as he turned to Naruto and gripped the collar of his shirt. Ria-senpai spent the night with you? Cried the teenager with shock and jealousy. You damn weird lucky bastard. Naruto glared at Issei and shoved him away. Shut up you damn pervert. Exclaimed the blonde angrily as he towered over Issei. Nothing happened between Ria-senpai and I, so shut your mouth before I make you. Ria's clapped her hands together with a smile on her face. Okay, that's enough, said the young woman as Naruto retracted his glare from Issei. Now that everyone is here, I officially welcome you to the Occult Research Club. Exclaimed Rias with a bright smile on her face as she looked at Naruto and Issei. But research is just a cover-up in our club, it is more like a hobby. The group settled into couches with Rias sitting in the main seat looking at all her subjects. Issei looked up blankly. What do you mean? Rias smirked and looked over at Naruto. I'll be frank here, we are all devils. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the woman and smirked. That is indeed very frank, but are you telling the truth? Ria smiled and stood up to walk closer to Naruto. Do you remember the black-winged woman from last night? Asked the beauty as both Naruto and Issei's eyes widened. She was a fallen angel. Issei's eyes widened as Naruto scoffed inwardly, but Ria's continued. Once angels serving God, they were sent down to the underworld because of their wicked hearts. Naruto looked up at the woman and crossed his arms, fallen angels. Rias nodded with a smirk. Yes, these angels try to manipulate humans and kill us devils, further explained the beauty. This is a conflict that has been brewing since ancient times, a war to decide who will rule the underworld. We also have real angels sent by God himself to destroy us, so we are pretty much being attacked from all sides. Naruto suddenly stood up and stared down at Rias who was in front of him. This is enough, muttered the man with a soft voice. I don't want to hear any of the anymore. With that, Naruto turned and made his way out of the room. I am a man of science, and I refuse to believe in such nonsense. The red-haired beauty smiled and shook her head. You will see Naruto, I am sure of it, said the woman as Naruto opened the door. You are my knight and I know you will come back to us. Naruto walked out of the door without another word and closed the door behind him. Started Kaneko with her stoic voice. He is rather ignorant, isn't he? Issei stood up and scoffed at the closed door. Don't mind that weirdo. Exclaimed the young man loudly. He's just a guy who thinks he is better than everyone else. Continued Issei as the group listened to him. How dare he point out I'm a pervert, I bet he is just as pervert as I am, always disappearing from class. Issei ranted as he turned to face the others. He probably runs off to peep at girls in the locker room. Rias cleared her throat. Actually, I know where Naruto goes during his constant absence in school. Bakendo looked interested and smiled. So you really were interested in him from the start? The red-haired woman shook her head with a smile. Not really, it was only after last night that I decided to investigate on Naruto with my familiar, and she searched all over the city and asked many people for his information, and I am very surprised at what she found, said Rias with her sweet voice. Issei snorted and looked away. What does he do, buy porn all over the city? Rias looked serious as she turned to face her subjects. Naruto has the power to see people's internal bodies, and he uses that power to help people all over town, started the young woman as the others listened on with surprise. According to this homeless man I spoke to, Naruto had been visiting all sorts of homeless shelters and areas and cured them of their sickness. Issei's eyes widened in shock at the news. The homeless man told me that he was eternally grateful towards Naruto because Naruto saved him and countless others in the past year. Rias smiled and looked toward the door. They call him a hero. Tiba smiled and nodded his head. What a good man, I had no idea he went to such lengths to help people. Bakendo nodded. Yes, it is very admirable of him. Kaneko chewed on her snacks as she looked at Issei. Someone like you shouldn't insult someone like him. Issei looked down at the ground feeling a little guilty. Wow, that weirdo is actually such a nice person. Naruto had his hands in his pockets as he walked down a busy street near the area he was stabbed and his mind was going 100 miles per hour, trying to reason out logical reasons. The blonde clearly remembered the strange woman stabbing him in the chest, but he just couldn't accept that he was pulled into a conflict between beings that should only exist in fantasy books. Naruto had no faith in God or any religion, he found the notion of religion to be a good way to create order out of chaos back in the time when man had no understanding of their world and was outdated in the present day. It was very hard to Naruto to accept that some people in his school were actually devils and angels were trying to kill them. I know I was stabbed here last night, thought the blonde man as he rubbed his chest with his fingers. How can a wound so serious just disappear in one night? There must be something logical about this. Naruto rubbed his temple as he shook his head to clear his head. The scene in the club room kept playing itself over and over again in Naruto's mind, and he was finding it harder and harder to refute Ria's reasons, but he couldn't just believe that heaven and hell actually exists and the ancient war was still going on. The blonde felt a little guilty about walking out of the clubroom so disrespectfully, as Riaz was potentially a person who had saved his life and gave him another chance to see his family again. Maybe I should go back to apologize tomorrow. Naruto's mind was so engrossed to his thought, he failed to notice that he had already walked back to the very place he was stabbed the night before. A sense of foreboding suddenly rushed through Naruto's body as he looked back behind him. What is this feeling? The woman was making her way to Naruto, and her closed leather jacket displayed the oddly malicious moonlight to Naruto. I stray? Asked the woman to herself as her black hair waved in the air with the cold wind. Such a weak devil shouldn't wander the streets alone. Naruto looked around him for signs of other people, but was shocked to see that he was the only person in the perimeter. The blonde grunted and looked back at the woman with glare. Who are you, and what do you want with me? A pair of black wings suddenly grew out of the woman's back as she viciously smirked at Naruto. I am a fallen angel, you are a devil, so what do you think I am going to do? Said the woman as she summoned a blade made out of light into her hands. Die, devil scum. Naruto leaped out of the way as the blade flew past him. Fallen angel. Muttered the blonde as he got up to his feet. She is like the woman from last night, these people actually exist. The woman threw another few blade at him and Naruto was dodging from left to right, his only advantage was that with his eyes, he could see which muscles the woman were using, which would allow him to predict her movements a little. The woman chuckled. You are more agile than I expected, this kind of hunting is fun. The blonde grunted as he pulled himself from left to right. Damn, this woman is really going to kill me. Suddenly, the faces of his family flashed into Naruto's mind and he saw his parents and little sister crying. The thoughts of dying once again filled Naruto's mind as he imagined what his family would feel like if he died, and he was filled with an unprecedented surge of motivation. He had to survive so he could go back to his family. A familiar surge of power once again lingered along Naruto's right hand and it was increasing in power with every passing second. I need more power. Cried Naruto in his mind as he suddenly gripped his right hand. A powerful light erupted from Naruto's fist as a shockwave blasted through the area. The blonde was shocked to feel his hand actually holding onto something and he looked down to see that he was holding on a hilt of a blade. It was a simple long sword with a white hilt and it was shaking with power. But the one thing that Naruto didn't understand was the blade of the sword, which was all rusty and looked terrible. The woman laughed as she pointed at Naruto. Oh, you have a sacred gear, but that piece of trash looks like it would break if it hits me. Naruto growled and ignored the appearance of his blade. This will have to do. Cried the young man as he ran forward and suddenly found that he was many times faster than before. With a second, Naruto appeared in front of the woman and with a hard slash of his blade, he sliced the woman across her stomach. What? Cried the fallen angel as she jumped back. Naruto knew that he couldn't let her recover her movements, so he charged again with his newfound speed. I need to attack her arms first, thought the young man as he appeared next to the woman and sliced open her right triceps muscle. As the woman was screeching in pain, Naruto saw that she was about to swing at him with her left arm, so he quickly knelt down to dodge. Just as the woman's left arm was passing over his head, Naruto lifted his blade up and allowed the woman to slice open her own left forearm. I will not die tonight. Cried Naruto as he kicked the woman on the stomach and sent her backwards to the ground. The fallen angel got to her feet and glared at Naruto. You're a knight. Naruto ignored whatever the woman was saying and raised his blade up into the air. Get out of my sight, you crazy bitch. The blonde slashed the blade down as hard as he could and sent a crescent blade of gray energy at the woman. The traveling blade crashed into the ground and blasted the woman further back as she spat out some blood. Why you will pay for this? Cried the woman with a weak voice as her wings barely got her into the air. Naruto could see how extensive the woman's injuries were with his eyes and knew that she could no longer attack him. You and whoever you belong to will be judged by us. Cried the fallen angel as she vanished with a burst of speed. The blonde stared at the falling black feathers as he felt the power in his body. What is this? Naruto looked down at his blade with wonder. She said something about a sacred gear, is this it? Naruto. Called out a voice from behind the young man and he looked back to see Rias. Ria-senpai. Replied Naruto with surprise. A beautiful woman walked up to Naruto with a smile on her face. Come back with me, I still have more things to explain to you. With that, Rias turned around and gestured Naruto to follow her, and this time she knew that he would be much more open-minded. Thank you again, Naruto-san. Exclaimed a middle-aged man with a bright smile on his face. You're a saint. The blonde just smiled back as he packed his medical supplies back into his backpack and just waved his hand. Naruto had once again visited one of the many homeless-filled areas of the town, and it had been a busy day. The line for medical attention stretched to the ends of the long back alley they were in, and Naruto had used almost all of his supplies in the 6 hours he was present. It's my pleasure to help. Replied Naruto as many others started to bow and thank him repeatedly. It had been a few days since Naruto had his encounter with the fallen angel, and his life had more or less changed forever. But he was glad that he still had the time to help people around town, and with his newfound speed as Ria's knight, Naruto could make it to many different places with only a few minutes' time. Stealing at night had also become a lot easier since his eyes could see in the dark very well after becoming a devil. A soft hand suddenly touched Naruto's shoulder, and he was surprised when he saw who it belonged to. Ria's Butchu. "Hey Naruto," chirped the beautiful girl with a smile on her face. "I was just passing by and I wanted to see how you were doing." Naruto smiled back and nodded. Today was a good day, many people were here today and they all got the help they needed. After hearing the full story behind the conflict of devil, angels, and fallen angels, Naruto decided to join the Occult Club and learn more about them. The blonde could no longer find any ground to stand on when he tried to refute Ria's claims, especially after he managed to summon a pair of wings from his back. "So this is where you go all the time?" asked Ria as she looked around at the large crowd of people chatting amongst each other, all with smiles on their faces. Naruto sighed as he stood next to the young woman. "Not really, but all the places I go to are pretty much like this," said the blonde with a sad voice as he looked at the poor conditions of his patients. "This is one of the reasons why I refused to believe in you when we first met. If God and devils are real, then why are there still so many people suffering?" Riaz looked over at her knight as he spoke. "Sometimes I wonder if God is even listening to prayers anymore." The red-haired beauty smiled as she faced Naruto and looked up at him. "Well, at least they have you to help them." Naruto smiled and looked into Ria's green eyes. "Well, it's the least I can do." Riaz placed a hand on Naruto's cheek and leaned closer to him. "I'm glad my handsome knight can help so many people." The blonde blushed at the affection and close proximity and just nodded. "Thank you, Butchu." "Oh, Naruto-san," cried a woman behind him as a bunch of people looked over. "Is this your girlfriend?" With that, Naruto's blush intensified as all of his patients looked over at the mention of his girlfriend. Everyone had smiles on their faces as they came forward to see Riaz better, and many of them thought that she made a great girlfriend for their hero. Naruto looked good next to Riaz, there was just something about their red and blonde hair that really complemented each other. Naruto shook his head with his blush still on. "No, this is the president of my club." The blonde's voice didn't reach anyone's ears as most people crowded over to Riaz. "Oju-chan, Naruto-san is a real keeper, make sure you take good care of him, okay?" asked a middle-aged lady with a smile on her face. "He is our hero." Another woman came over along with her young son. "Yes, Naruto-san is a great man and you are so lucky to have him," she exclaimed with a happy smile. "Make sure you don't let anyone take him away." Riaz just smiled at the people around her as they continued to ramble on about what great man was Naruto. All the while, Naruto stood back and watched the scene with a smile on his face, not because of the compliments he was getting from his patients, but from the smile on Ria's face. If it was any other girl, Naruto knew that they would freak out when so many homeless people were crowding around her, but Riaz didn't seem to mind at all. The smile of the red-haired beauty's face was bright and true, and it made Naruto's respect for her increase once again. "I know Naruto is really one of a kind," chirped Riaz as she walked back to Naruto and wrapped her arms around him on. "That's why he is mine." The crowd smiled at the sight as Naruto blushed at the double implications of Ria's words, and he really doubted if anyone in the crowd would even imagine that he actually belonged to her. Naruto was still having a very hard time being classified as Ria's knight, which was a better way of saying her servant, but he had no choice in the matter. Ria saved his life when he was killed, and so he had to devote his life to her, it was as simple as that. "Okay everyone," started Naruto as he swung his backpack over his shoulder. "We have to go now, I'll see you all later." With that, Naruto turned around with Riaz and they both made their way out of the alley, but Riaz was still holding on to Naruto's arm. "Okay Naruto-san, go enjoy your date." Naruto blushed again at the thought of actually dating Riaz, and he hoped that she didn't see it. The Occult Research Club members were all gathered inside their club room again and were all sitting in their usual seat on the couches. Riaz was going over the activities of the club while Naruto and Issei were once again handed flyers for them to hand out to potential contractors. It had been almost a week since Naruto had joined the club and he was starting to grow accustomed to his responsibilities. Handing out the flyers doesn't take Naruto much time seeing that he had enough power for a Keno to teleport him to his destinations, unlike Issei. "Damn it," cried Issei as he made his way to the door. "What sort of devil has to ride a bike to his summoner?" Naruto smirked as the perverted man walked out of the room and smiled at Akeno when she handed him his own stack of flyers. "Thank you, Akeno-san." The blonde had become quite friendly with the members of his club, with Issei being the least of his priorities. He enjoyed the company of some friends after so many years of isolation, and he found the casual conversations to be relaxing and comfortable. Hiba was a much nicer man than Naruto originally thought, he wasn't the playboy that everyone said he was. Akeno acted like a kind older sister to the group and she would often offer tea and cookies for everyone while in meetings. Naruto really appreciated her friendship. There was also Kaneko, who was the youngest out of the group. Being the older brother that he was, Naruto often bought the girls snacks and meals when he would go to the club for meetings and she started to warm up to him. Then there was Rias, the president of the club and the one person Naruto wanted to really get to know better. From what Naruto knew, Rias was a high-class devil and was the heiress to one of the most powerful families in the underworld. She was a third-year student of Kuo Academy and she was known as the most beautiful girl in the school. And the one thing that always seems to pop into Naruto's mind was that her smile was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "After you are done with these you are free to go, Naruto," said Rias with a smile on her face. "I know you are due on the east end of town today." Naruto smiled as he stepped into the magic circle. "Thank you Butchu." Akeno smiled at Naruto as she channeled her power through her spell. "Good luck, Naruto-kun." The magic circle transported Naruto to his destination and left the room with only the girls and Kiba after the light died down. Kaneko and Kiba both had their own summoning orders to do, so they excused themselves from the president and vice president and left the room themselves. In the week that Naruto had joined the club, he actually formed 3 contracts already with the people he had visited and all of them were women. It seemed that like Kiba, Naruto's handsome appearance helped him with his devil responsibilities. Rias sighed in relaxation as she sat down on the couch. "The tea is really nice today, Akeno." Akeno sat down next to her best friend and held a cup of her own. "So Ria," said the woman using her master's first name since they were alone. "What do you think of Naruto-kun and Issei-kun?" The high-class devil smiled and nodded. "I think they are a fine addition to our group." Akeno smiled and nodded in agreement. "Issei needs to be ironed out a lot more before he will be on the others' level, but I think Naruto will catch on very quickly." The black-haired lady nodded. "Yes, he seems to be learning much faster than Kiba was when he first started, but I do find his sacred gear confusing." Rias nodded seriously. "Yes, his sword feels really weird, it doesn't even feel dark like Kiba's swords," said the president as she looked at her queen. "I feel that his devil powers do not work with his blade, it is as if his blade is limiting his power as he trains." Akeno took a sip of her tea before she looked back up at her master. "I feel a tremendous power coming from within Naruto, and I know that he has the potential to be a very powerful knight." The president nodded again. "I agree, but only time will show how strong Naruto really is." After another busy night with his patients, Naruto fell asleep the moment his body fell onto his bed. Even with his new abilities as a knight, Naruto still felt fatigue after long hours of work and sleep was the best thing on his agenda every day. Naruto was glad that the people who summon him for contracts would only ask him for normal things such as cooking, shopping, dating advice, or gaming partner. The one strange encounter Naruto had with a summoner was with a woman who wanted him to sleep with her. It was safe to say that Naruto left that house in seconds. The sunlight landed on the closed eyes of Naruto as he slowly awoke from his slumber. Moaned Naruto in satisfaction as he enjoyed the comfort of his soft bed. The warmth under the blanket was perfect and his bare skin felt great against the silk sheets on the bed. Naruto was too tired to change into his sleeping attire the previous night, so he just slept in a pair of boxers, which felt much better than his t-shirt and shorts. The one thing that really made his morning even more comfortable was the soft and warm pillow he had wrapped around his arms. The pillow was warm, soft, and had a very sweet smell of roses. "1 second, I don't have such a big pillow." Naruto opened his eyes and he felt his entire body shudder when he saw that his pillow was actually the body of Rias Gremory, his master. Rias had her head tucked into the crook of Naruto's neck, her arms tightly wrapped around Naruto's waist, and had a small smile on her face as she continued to sleep. Her vibrant red hair was spread along the pillow they were sharing and she had her chest pressed right up against Naruto's own. "Holy shit," thought Naruto with widened eyes when he felt bare skin rub against his own. "Is she naked under the blanket?" Rias moaned softly in her sleep as she snuggled deeper against Naruto and accidentally pushed her against his chest as her rubbed along his skin. Naruto's face was blood red as he felt his boxers tighten with his growing arousal and he turned his pelvis away as much as possible in his position. But the movement of his body and the bed started to wake Rias from her peaceful sleep and her eyes parted ever so slowly to see the blushing face of her knight looking at her. "Good morning," Naruto whispered the beauty with a soft smile on her face. Naruto gulped as he looked onto his master's green eyes. "Gee, good morning Butchu," started the blonde with a faint whisper. "Why are you in bed with me?" Rias started to snuggle up against Naruto even more as she closed her eyes. "I wanted to check if you were okay after your summon from last night, but when I got here you were already asleep, so I decided to join you." The blonde tried to turn his obvious arousal away as he felt Rias rub against his side. "But why are you naked?" The beauty rested her head on Naruto's shoulder and started to drift off again. "I can't sleep unless I am nude," whispered Riaz softly as her warm breath tingled the blonde's cheek. Naruto blushed harder as he saw the tent his manhood made under the covers. "This is a very compromising position for us, how about I go change first and you can have the bed for yourself." The blonde really needed to get out of the bed before the woman would brush against his raging erection. The last thing he wanted was for Riaz to see him as a pervert like Issei. Riaz moaned and held on to Naruto harder. "Don't move, you make a very comfortable pillow," whispered the girl as she delicately placed a hand on Naruto's chest. "We still have a while before we need to get ready for school." Naruto closed his eyes and tried to level out his breathing with continuous deep breaths. After a full minute of silent relaxation, Naruto turned his head to look at his master who was sleeping peacefully beside him on the right. Naruto could feel that his right hand was against Ria's lower back and he decided to try to relax into the situation. With a light touch, Naruto pulled Riaz close to himself by the small of her back, turned himself to the side, and used his left arm to secure her in place. Once again, Naruto's chest was up against Ria's and he didn't feel as hyped up as before, probably because he was busy focusing on her pretty face in front of him. Ria's plump lips were slightly parted as she breathed in and out silently, and they looked dangerously juicy and soft in Naruto's eyes. "No, I am not Issei," cried Naruto inside his mind as his attraction to Riaz increased by the second. The blonde snapped his eyes closed and resumed his series of deep breaths, but it took longer than last time for him to fully calm down. Naruto finally opened his eyes, but he found Riaz looking straight back at him. "But you?" exclaimed Naruto as he pulled back a little. Riaz smiled as she winked at her knight. "Is it time for school yet?" "Almost, we have another hour and a half before class starts," softly replied Naruto with a small smile on his face. "Feel free to use the shower if you need it," said the young man as he hoped that his mother would not see Riaz. Riaz shook her head. "It's okay, I'll just take one at the club," later replied the red-haired beauty as she sat up on the bed, giving Naruto a very full view on her alluring slim waist. "Do you want to grab something to eat before school?" Naruto jumped out of bed and quickly slipped on a pair of sweatpants. "I know a good breakfast place near the school, I'll treat you there." With that, Naruto ran out of the room as fast as he could so Riaz wouldn't see his erection sticking out from his pants. "Be back in a bit." Riaz giggled at her knight as she started to put on her own clothes. "So cute. Your mother is such a good cook," happily said Riaz as she smiled over at Naruto. In the end, Naruto never managed to pull Riaz out of his house before his mother saw them together again and she ended up commanding them to stay for breakfast. Kurenai seemed to have warmed up to Riaz and was quite gently and nice to her, which really surprised Naruto. Naruto's father smiled at him discreetly as he sat next to Riaz, signaling that he approved of her. Then there was Yuki, the one person that had really taken a liking to Riaz, and she chatted on with Riaz the whole time they were eating. Naruto smiled as he held his backpack over one shoulder. "I still think the restaurant is better." The blonde hated the awkward moments with his family and Riaz, but he was a little happy that his family all seemed to like his master. "I'll bring you there next time." Riaz smiled and nodded. "Sure," muttered the beauty as she turned to face Naruto. "But let me fix this first." Naruto blushed as Riaz reached up to his tie and began to fix it, and the smile on her face did not help the situation. "Thank you, but you," said Naruto as he looked around his surroundings and sighed when he saw many of the other students looking over at their direction. The rumors of him and Riaz getting together had already gone viral in the past week and they basically sealed their fate after Riaz's affectionate gesture with his tie. The blonde had seriously considered asking Riaz out on a date later on, but seeing that he was only one of her servants, he wouldn't be good enough for her, at least it will be for the moment. The beauty smiled and pulled back. "Now let's get to class, we may have some work to do." Naruto looked back at the entrance of the school and saw the huge crowd that was staring at their direction and really didn't want to go anywhere near them. "Hey, if you don't have anything important in class today, how about we skip school and go to one of the homeless shelters today?" Riaz was intrigued and stopped to look back at her knight. "Is it okay for me to come with you? I don't know much about healing." The blonde smiled and nodded. "It would be nice to have someone with me when I go." Riaz smiled and grabbed onto Naruto's arm. "Then sure, I've been wanting to help you in doing something so meaningful." Naruto quickly led his master away from the school and inwardly sighed when he heard distant chatter and squeals coming from the school. At this point it would be impossible to deny the student body's claim that they were a couple, even though they were only friends at most. But Naruto felt rather happy that people thought he made a cute couple with Riaz, and it gave him hope that if one day he would be promoted to a high-class devil, he would have a chance with Riaz. The blonde led his master to his regular bus stop and got on the first bus that would take them to the southern parts of town, which was where a large portion of the homeless population resides. It was cute to watch Riaz try to get on the bus without any knowledge of paying the driver, but thankfully Naruto was with her and he explained everything to her. It was the first time that Riaz had ever been on a bus in her whole life and it was quite refreshing for her. "I've always wanted to go on a bus ride." chirped Rias happily as she sat next to Naruto at the back of an empty bus. Naruto chuckled as he settled his backpack on his lap. "It's nicer when it is not so crowded, but when it is rush hour it is terrible," said the man before he leaned closer to his master. "But after I became your knight, I just ran to most places because it would be faster than a bus." Rias giggled and nodded. "Well, you are fast for such a young knight, I would say that you would surpass even Kiba with a little time," praised the young woman with a proud smile on her face. "But enough about devils, tell me more about your family," suggested Rias with wink. The blonde smiled back and crossed his arms. "Well, there isn't much to tell," started the man softly. "My father is an engineer for a local company and my mother is a normal housewife who also teaches piano for the neighborhood kids." Naruto had started to learn piano from his mother since he was child and he had become quite good with it. Yuki-chan is an elementary school student who loves to watch TV and junk food and likes drinking soda a little too much. Rias giggled at the mention of the little girl. "Yuki-chan is just the cutest girl." Naruto smiled and nodded. "She's taken a real liking to you and would often ask me about you at home." "Really?" asked the beauty surprised. "What do you tell her about me?" The blonde chuckled and shook his head. "Not much, since I don't know much about you in the first place." Rias smiled before she rested her head on Naruto's shoulder, making him blush a little. "Well, my father is the head of the Gremory family and my mother married into our family from the Bale family, another high-class devil family of the underworld." Naruto nodded as his master spoke, the need of his future promotions becoming much more apparent to him. "I have an older brother and he is the demon lord of the underworld, Surzich's Lucifer." "Demon lord?" cried Naruto in shock as Rias giggled at his reaction. "He's the one who governs the entire underworld." Rias smiled and nodded against his shoulder. "Yes, Ani-sama is very powerful and is the leader of the four satans of the underworld." "So you are like the princess of the underworld?" asked Naruto in awe. The beauty smiled and shrugged. "Pretty much." Naruto chuckled to himself with a grin on his face. "Well, I'm the knight of a princess, that sounds nice." Rias giggled and wrapped her arms around Naruto's own. "Yep, you are my handsome knight," muttered the girl with her eyes closed. "And that is pretty much who Rias Gremory is." The blonde smiled at the affection shown by Rias and lightly rested his head against her own. "But I also know that you are a girl who likes strawberry jam way too much," said Naruto with a smile as he recalled Rias having toast at his home. "Someone who has never really had cereal before, someone who loves apple juice, and someone who always ties her right shoelaces before she even puts on the other shoe." Naruto looked down to see a surprised look on his master's face. "This someone is Ria Senpai, my senior and a regular girl who goes to the same school as me and not the demonic princess of the underworld." Rias looked up at Naruto with a small smile on her face. "You know you are the first person to ever see me as me and not as Rias Gremory." "Well, you are Rias Gremory, my master, but you are also a person who I value as a friend and I want to get to know the real you," said Naruto with a smile on his face. "I know there is much more to you than being the president of our club and the daughter of the largest devil family of the underworld." Rias blushed as she leaned up to Naruto's cheek. "Thank you," Naruto whispered the girl as she gently kissed his cheek. Naruto blushed as a hand absent-mindedly reached up to touch his cheek. "Why, you're welcome. Maybe I should sleep more at your place so you can learn more about me," whispered Rias with a sexy tone close to Naruto's ear. "Would you mind if I did that?" The blonde blushed even harder than before and shook his head. "Of course I don't mind, feel free to come over anytime, but you." The beauty held onto Naruto's chin lightly and tilted his face to face her. "When we are alone, call me Rias, okay?" Naruto nodded with his lips dangerously close to his master's. "Okay, Rias." After another half hour of comfortable conversation on the bus, the two devils made it to their intended destination and got off the bus with smiles on their faces. Naruto was glad that he got the chance to visit the southern area of town ahead of schedule and hoped that he had enough supplies with him to tend to the people. Ria's arms remained wrapped around Naruto's own as they walked to the homeless shelter near the edge of town and she was looking quite happy with a smile on her face. Rias had taken a huge liking to her new knight and she looked forward to spending more time with him. The beauty had never met anyone like Naruto before, someone who was so selfless and righteous, someone who cared so much about others, and someone who saw past her external identity as the Gremory heiress and acknowledged her existence as Rias. She never thought that she would run into such a great man by chance and would revive him. As her knight, Rias was very happy to finally have someone like Naruto in her life. "Ahhh," cried a sudden voice, a girl. Naruto looked over to see a girl lying on the ground after tripping on something. "Are you alright?" asked the blonde as he walked over to help the girl up. "Yes, thank you," replied the girl with a polite and soft voice. The girl had long blonde hair and green eyes and was quite cute in Naruto's opinion. She was dressed in a nun's clothes, which was odd considering her young age. Rias walked over to the scene with a smile on her face and looked down at the girl. The red-haired beauty saw no malice in the girl's eyes, but felt some sort of power residing inside her, and she finally noticed her traveling bags to the side of the road. "Are you a tourist?" asked Riaz as she picked up the fallen bag from the ground and handed it back to the girl. The blonde girl smiled and nervously poked her fingers together. "Can you please help me, I got lost." In the 1 year that Naruto had been helping the homeless population of the city, he had never had it so easy. Riaz was a big help with the organizational format of the lineup and had organized a very efficient and effective system with his medical tools and medicine. But the real helper of the day was by far Asia Argento, a young nun who wanted to help with Naruto's cause before she headed back to her church. According to Riaz, Asia had a very special and rare sacred gear called Twilight Healing, and it had the ability to heal any sort of injury to all types of beings. Naruto was in awe at the sight of Asia healing a cut that would have taken weeks to heal in a few seconds. The blonde used his eyes to analyze the healing process, and he saw that down to the smallest piece of fiber was completely healed. It was truly an incredible power. "Wow, when did you have two beautiful girls helping you out, Naruto-san?" asked a middle-aged man with a man case of diabetes and was here for more insulin. Naruto smiled as he handed the man a small pack of pills. "They are my friends and they are just helping me out for today, but I got to say that it is much easier with them around." Ria smiled as she continued to hand out some forms that Naruto had prepared for his patients. She enjoyed helping the people around her and she felt much more accomplished here than in her regular classroom learning about math. Asia also had a smile on her face as she sat next to Naruto waiting for someone who needed her help, and she also enjoyed using her power to help so many people who needed it. It made her feel happy. "Thank you for letting me help, Naruto-san," chirped the blonde girl happily as she placed her hands on her lap elegantly. Naruto smiled back at the innocent girl. "I should thank you for helping me, with you here I can do so much more than just with some medicine." The last patient of the line was finished and Naruto decided to call it a day. With the help of Riaz and Asia, Naruto finished in 3 hours, something that normally would have taken him at least 6 hours to do, and he was very happy about it. It would take them about an hour to get back to the school, which would be perfectly on time to meet at the club for their daily meeting. Riaz smiled as she stood next to Naruto. "Come back with us, the church is not far from where we are going." Asia smiled and bowed happily. "Thank you very much." Naruto smiled and patted the girl's head. "No problem, let's go." The group made it onto the same bus they used to get to the southern part of town, and the trip back to their side of town took about 45 minutes. Asia was a sweet girl who enjoyed interacting with Riaz and Naruto, especially the latter since he also had a passion in healing people. Naruto also enjoyed talking with Asia and he wanted to get to know her better. She reminded him of his little sister. Riaz sat on the other side of Naruto and took her time observing the power that Asia possessed, which was the result of a very rare sacred gear, Twilight Healing. Though she was intrigued with Asia's power, Riaz was still a little cautious of her since he was a nun and was heading back to the town church, which was considered a dangerous place for devils. "You have a great power, Asia-chan," said Naruto excitedly. "I wish I had some power like that." Asia blushed from the praise and twiddled her fingers on her lap. "You flatter me, Naruto-san, you are the one who makes a huge effort with helping people." The two blonde engaged in friendly chatter for the whole trip back to their side of town and the bus ride felt like 5 minutes for them. Naruto had never really met another person he could really share his medical passion and he never thought that someone would possess such a special power like Asia. With her Twilight Healing's help, Naruto was sure that he would be able to help everyone he came across, no matter what sort of sickness they had. Riaz was silent through most of the bus ride but maintained her friendly expression to the innocent girl who was very friendly to her. The red-haired beauty showed Asia's way to the church when they were a few blocks away from it and told her that they had to hurry to class. Asia was sad that she had to part with her new friend so soon, but she promised that she would visit them sometimes at their school. Naruto even promised Asia that he would bring her to his homeless shelters occasionally. Naruto smiled as he walked casually alongside Riaz. "So what do I have to do tonight, but you?" "Nothing much," muttered the girl before she looked at Naruto fully. "On a serious note, you must never visit Asia again." The blonde's eyes widened surprised. "Why?" Riaz sighed as she placed a soft hand on Naruto's cheek. "I know you have really taken a liking to little Asia-chan, but she is a sister of the church and we are devils and we must never closely associate with each other." Naruto looked into Ria's soft eyes and saw that she was very serious. "Okay, I understand, but you." The beauty stepped closer to Naruto and felt his breath tickle her lips. "I told you, Naruto," she whispered sexily. "You can call me Riaz when we are alone." Despite the situation, Naruto blushed at the close proximity of Ria's lips. "I'm sorry, Riaz." Riaz smiled and wrapped her arms around Naruto as she looked up into his blue eyes. "I'm sorry that you can't see your new friend again, but this is something that we must accept," said the girl kindly with a smile on her face. But if you want I can go with you every time you need an assistant. Naruto knew that Rias didn't want any of this either and was grateful that she made the effort to comfort him. I would love to have you with me, Rias replied the blonde softly as he lightly held Ria's waist with his gentle hands. And I should be the one who comforts you when you need it, not the other way around, I am the knight for you Rias Himisama. Rias giggled as her hands made their way around Naruto's neck. I want to be close to my servants, especially the one who I find very intriguing and sweet, whispered the girl as her lips inched dangerously close to Naruto's own. The blonde tried to even out his increasing breathing pace, thank you but you. The beauty breathed out evenly against Naruto's lips as she looked into his eyes. You know all devils have wants and desires, but so far I haven't seen anything from you, Naruto blushed at her sexy voice and the bountiful mounds that were pressed against his chest. Is there anything that you whispered the girl huskily, desire? Naruto felt his heart pound forcefully against his chest as gallons of blood rushed through his face, Rias. Rias had a sweet smile on her face as her fingers traced the back of Naruto's neck, anything at all. For the first time in his life, Naruto's brain gave him no answer at all, and his heart was fluttering rapidly as he found his lips slowly reaching to caress Ria's own. But fortunately or unfortunately, some whispering and giggles a short distance from where they were standing broke Naruto out of his devilish and carnal desire. Oh, I think they are going to kiss, whispered a girl too loudly for comfort. Another girl giggled with a large blush on her face. No, I think they are going to make out. The young man had a slight nosebleed as he nudged his equally excited friend next to him. Look at that Rias Onasama had her pressed against him. The other man held his fists angrily as tears streamed down his face. Damn that Uzumaki lucky bastard. Naruto blushed and pulled away from Rias, feeling extremely annoyed at the people staring at them, especially the two obnoxious boy in front who both shared the same reputation as Issei. With a slight sigh, Naruto grabbed onto an irritated Ria's hand and led her through the crowd and into the school. It took a lot of self-control from Naruto to stop himself from speeding into the school with his super speed, and it was rapidly depleting with the growing volume of the whispers and giggles around him. Ria sighed as she glared a little at the people around her. Damn, I wanted to see where that was heading. As if fate was against him, Issei chose that particular moment to walk out of the school and saw his master and fellow peerage member. Hey but you, Naruto. Greeted the young man as his eyes immediately traveled to Ria's. How are you doing today? Asked a pervert with a goofy smile on his face. Naruto saw where Issei was looking and felt very annoyed. Get out of our damn way. Issei was surprised when the two just walked past him with small blushes on their face and could only look around for more evidence. What the hell did I do? Naruto was silently sitting in his usual seat in the club room, but he was the only one in the room at the moment. After the blood-rushing experience with Rias, the blonde was trying to think of some way to maintain his friendship with Asia, despite her being a nun and him being a devil. The girl was very innocent and genuine, and Naruto didn't think that she would really try to kill him if she found out as being a devil. The one thing that really posed a problem was the fact that Asia was staying at the church, which was apparently one of the taboo places for devils, and Rias had looked very seriously when she ordered him to not ever visit it. It was ironic to Naruto that when he was a human he never even thought about trying to visit the church, but when he was a devil he was trying to sneak in without getting killed. What are thinking so hard about, Naruto-kun? Asked Akeno suddenly as she crept up from behind the couch. Naruto jumped a little from his seat as he patted his chest in fright, Akeno-san. The black-haired beauty giggled at Naruto as she sat down next to him. So what are you thinking about? Asked Akeno again with a smile on her face. Is it about Butchu? I heard that you two were kissing each other in front of the SCHOOL. Naruto blushed as he sat up taller. What? He cried in shock. That's what they've been saying now. Akeno giggled again and nodded. Yep, so did you kiss her? The blonde waved his hands around with a blush still on his face. No. Cried the man as he faced Akeno. We were just hugging and they just saw us at a weird angle. The beauty had a smirk on her face as she edged closer to Naruto. Naruto-kun, have you ever even kissed a girl? Naruto blushed even harder as he backed away. Well. Akeno's smirk widened and inched closer to Naruto again. Do you want to practice with me? You might need it if you want to make Butchu feel good later on. The beauty's plump and pink lips looked very juicy and delicious to Naruto, especially when she parted her lips and allowed her wet tongue to apply a layer of shine onto them. I am not a pervert. Cried Naruto in his mind as he felt his desire rise up again. I am not a pervert. Naruto said a stern voice as Naruto saw Rias looking down at him while standing behind the couch. What are you doing? Nothing. Cried Naruto loudly as he backed himself to the end of the couch. Akeno had a sweet smile on her face as she placed a hand on her cheek. Oh, you are such a cute guy, Naruto-kun. Exclaimed the black-haired beauty with her soft and seductive voice. Rias looked annoyed as she turned around and walked to her own seat. Stop whatever you are doing, we have a job to do tonight. Naruto wanted to explain to Rias that he wasn't going to kiss Akeno, but Kiba, Kaneko, and Issei walked into the room soon after, and they all took a seat in their usual couch. The blonde looked over at Rias a little guiltily. They were not dating or anything, but after the past few days with Rias, Naruto felt a sense belonging to her, and his feelings for her made the moment even worse for him. Naruto looked to his side and blushed when Akeno sent him a sweet wink. She was also a very beautiful woman that Naruto was attracted to. With a sigh, Naruto shook his head of his thoughts and just paid attention to what Rias had to say. I just got word from the Gremarite Duke that a stray devil is somewhere in town and we have been tasked to destroy it, explained the club president with her arms crossed. I believe it is hiding in the old abandoned theater on the edge of town, so let's get going. Akeno drew one magic circle at the center of the room as all members stepped into it. Naruto was standing behind Rias and Akeno with Kiba on his right side. This would be the first official devil mission Naruto would go on, and he was determined to find out more about his kind and how they operate. The teleportation was just like every other time, but they arrived at their destination. The blonde was looking at a dark forest with an old building in the middle of it. Naruto walked up to beside Rias with a serious expression in his face. So what is a stray devil? Rias looked over at the tall man with her arms crossed. Sometimes devils will betray their masters so they can live doing what they want, and that is what we call a stray devil. The beauty looked ahead at the old building. This one in particular had been very active, and I was told that it would lure humans into the building and eat them alive. Eat them? Cried Issei in shock. Rias nodded. Yes, devils like these can do anything they want, and we must stop it before it harms any more humans. The group walked into the dark building and was met with a scene that resembled some battered ruins out of a movie. The only source of light was the moon seeping in from the large opening at the entrance of the building, where a large double door was spread open. The eerie white light of the moon made the scene all the more creepy and paranormal, especially when the estrade furniture of the place casted shadows of strange shapes on the pale walls that enveloped the group. Oh, I smell something disgusting, said an oddly vibrating voice as a long shadow emerged from the corner on the far end of the building. But there is also something that smells exquisite. The stray devil looked a lot different than what Naruto had expected. Instead of being red with strange horns, this stray had a face of a beautiful young woman and was topless to reveal a pair of rather bountiful. But when Naruto looked lower, he was shocked at what he saw. What a disgusting body, muttered Naruto as he used his powers to analyze the body of the stray, and he found that her entire lower half resembled that of a centaur. She had large forelegs-like limbs, but the front two resembled humanoid hands with red fingernails as claws. There was also a large cavity located where her stomach should be, and Naruto could see vicious teeth-like protrusions inside it, which he assumed was for devouring her victims. Issei and a grin on his face as the stray fondled her own dot. She looks more like an exhibitionist to me. Rias sighed at her pawn's personality and stepped forward. I, Rias Gremory, will destroy you. Big words for a little girl, let me dye your body as red as your hair. The strays started to become erect as magic circles appeared on them. Take this. Quick shots of acid shot out of the end towards the group, and the green substance looked rather lethal from where Naruto saw them. Summoning his rusty blade from his body, Naruto used his speed to deflect the acid to the side walls and quickly cleared the area to avoid any splashback. The stray lifted one of its front claws and slammed it down at Naruto, but with his eyes, the blonde predicted the movements of the stray by reading the muscles it was using and managed to slice through the large limb with his blade. The cut was clean and smooth as Naruto detached the arm right where the joint was, but it was still very painful to the stray. Kiba sliced off the other arm and stood in front of Naruto with a smile on his face. Nice job, Naruto-san. Naruto smiled at his fellow blonde and held his blade in front of him. Thank you, Kiba-san. Kaneko jumped into the midst of battle, but was almost immediately swallowed by the stray's mouth-like stomach. Naruto was shocked and was about to rush in to rescue her, but it was no longer needed because the girl ripped the innards of the stray apart with her superhuman strength. Naruto smiled at the petite girl from where he stood, and she gave him a small nod back. He was shocked that Kaneko was actually so powerful. From the corner of his eyes, Naruto saw the arm he severed off was still moving, and it was heading towards Rias and Issei. With a quick burst of speed, Naruto appeared behind Rias with an arm around her waist and pulled her back to avoid the strike. Issei seemed to have noticed the same thing and jumped away from the arm, which was still coming towards them with its claws. Naruto channeled his energy to his sword as a familiar shroud of grey energy gathered on the blade, and with a hard slash, Naruto sent a crescent blade of energy at the arm, completely obliterating it from where it was. Rias was surprised that Naruto acted so quickly and smiled up at him. Thank you, Naruto. The blonde was blushing as his arms were still around Ria's waist and she was pressing up against him. No problem, but you. The Keno stalked forward to the main body of the stray with a smile on her face. Whoever tries to hurt my butchu will suffer endless pain. The powerful queen raised her hands into the air and summoned a large bolt of yellow lightning above her. The bolt shot down at the stray and enveloped its whole body in a shroud of piercing pain. Ria smirked as she saw the surprised expression on Naruto's face. There is one thing that I am sure you don't know about Akeno, and that is she is a sadist. Naruto watched as Akeno laughed as she watched the stray struggle under her power and felt a little intimidated by the normally gentle and sweet young woman. With his power, Naruto could see that the stray's body was being broken apart by Akeno's lightning and parts of it were being literally cooked alive. The blonde couldn't help but breath out a sigh of relief when Rias called out of Akeno and ordered her to stop her attack. Is it over already? Moaned out Akeno almost whining. This is disappointing. Rias walked up to the stray with her usual dignified fashion. Traitors like you do not deserve to live. The beauty spread her arms apart as a red magic circle appeared in front of her. Vanish from this world. A blast of red and black fire obliterated the stray with its concussive properties and left nothing but a shadow on the ground. Rias turned back to her peerage with a smile on her face. Okay, we are done here, let's to go back. Everyone except Naruto and Issei nodded back. Hi, butchu. Issei walked up to Naruto while looking at his hand. Man, that was kind of intense. Naruto nodded as he looked at the pawn through the corner of his eyes. Yeah, but at least it was not as boring as delivering flyers. The blonde never really liked killing things, but seeing that their target was a monster that killed people, he was fine with it. Naruto was once again finished with his medical session at one of the many homeless shelters of the town, and he thought he would be able to go home early since he was rather close to his home, but one phone call from Rias ruined all his plans. Apparently that were 2 summonses for Akeno tonight and the butchu wanted him to cover for the vice president because the 2 summonses were at similar times. The knight couldn't refuse the request from Rias, so he ran straight to the address with his advanced speed, which only took him about 5 minutes. Naruto rather liked signing contracts with various people as he was ambitious about being promoted to a higher class devil, partly because Naruto was a naturally ambitious person, but mostly because he wanted to ask Rias out and needed the advance ranking. So far, with his charismatic personality and devilish handsome looks, Naruto signed over 10 contracts and most of the contractors were female. The blonde found most of his clients to be very interesting, especially the one man who was addicting to all sorts of anime, which hooked Naruto to some anime of his own. His favorite one was about shinobi. Okay, muttered Naruto as he walked up to an address that matched the one he wrote down on a piece of paper. The blonde walked up to the front door and knocked a few times. Hello, this is Rias Gremory-sama's servant, is the client home? There was no response, so Naruto slowly opened the door and peeked inside. It was an average home with hardwood flooring and there was a dim light coming from one of the rooms of the house. There was a strange smell along the house and Naruto figured that it was miso soup after he stuck his head inside. The door was left opened, said the blonde to himself as he walked inside, but the moment his foot touched the floor, a sense of foreboding filled his entire being. Is there anyone home? Called out Naruto loudly to ensure that someone who hear him. No one answered the blonde, and as he ignored the bad feeling in his gut, Naruto walked further into the house to see if anything strange was happening. The blonde followed the dim yellow light on the other end of the house, and he approached the area cautiously. Soon he saw that the light came from several small candles on top of a desk inside the office of the home. Someone is setting a nice mood for me. As Naruto walked forward, he heard a padding noise the base of his shoe made with his step, and he looked down to see some liquid on the ground. It was something that Naruto saw every day and he recognized the smell, it was blood. A large area of the hardwood floor was flooded with a pool of blood and Naruto looked further into the room to find the source of it all. Despite seeing many different diseases before, Naruto placed a hand over his mouth to prevent throwing up upon the horrific scene. It was a man's dead body and it was mutilated to the point that it resembled a butchered pig at a meat store. Someone had skinned the man whole, parts of his limbs were scattered along the floor like scrap meat for sale, and his head was severed and placed on his desk chair. The one thing that bothered Naruto the most was the 2 empty eye sockets that were staring at him like twin dark abysses. With his eyes, Naruto could see that the man had been beaten very badly before he died, most of his bones were broken, and his skull was cracked quite badly. His limbs were hacked off violently by some sort of blade, and it was done in a barbaric and primal fashion, if the rough cut marks were of any indication. What is this? Muttered Naruto as the dinner he just had wanted to spill out of his stomach. Punishment of the wicked, said an eerily calm voice from the couch. I am quoting the holy scripture here. The man had short white hair and red eyes, and the clear clothes he was wearing made it obvious that he was Naruto's enemy. The man sighed as he stretched his arms out on the couch and he pushed his legs to stand up on his feet. So you are the devil this guy tried to summon before I killed him. Naruto narrowed his eyes and stepped back a little. You're the one who did this? Asked the blonde referring to the mutilated body on the floor. The white-haired man chuckled a little crazily and pulled out a gun and a blade in his hands. "This guy tried to summon evil bastard like you, so he deserved to die," muttered the man as he turned to fully face the blonde. "But I wanted to have some fun while I was on the job, so I toyed with his limbs a little." The blonde devil gritted his teeth in anger as he summoned his blade to his hand. "You sick bastard." The white-haired man chuckled and shook his head. "I don't see it that way. Taking care of you devils and these pathetic humans trying to summon you is my job." The man's blade suddenly extended further as light covered it fully. "The light sword," exclaimed Naruto as he recalled hearing Akeno explain to him the weaknesses of devils. The crazed man had a grin on his face as he pointed his blade at Naruto. "I will not pierce your heart with this blade and score a lovely headshot with this fabulous gun." With that, the man leaped at Naruto with his arms pulled back and he slashed his blade down at the blonde at high speed. Naruto managed to jump out of the way despite his initial shock and quickly turned his eyes back to see what the man was going to do next. The blonde's eyes widened when he noticed the man using his left arm muscles, which meant that he was going to use his gun. Knowing that he had to dodge quickly, Naruto used his superior speed as a knight to clear away from the man's line of sight in a split second and breathed out in relief when he saw the man fire a stray bullet at a wall. The white-haired man continued his assault and followed Naruto, no matter where he dodged to, and the walls around the room were becoming targets for his bullets. Thanks to his ability to see and analyze the movements of the white-haired man's bullets, Naruto could predict his movements and dodge ahead of time, so it was nearly impossible for the man to land a clear shot on him. "Stay still, you disgusting devil," cried the man angrily as he kept firing his weapon. Naruto smirked as he appeared right behind the man in his blind spot and slashed open a gushing wound on his back. As the man cried out in pain, Naruto targeted his left triceps and biceps and sliced through the as well. Without his two important muscles, the man dropped his arm to his side and with one more slice through his forearm, Naruto forced him to drop the gun to the floor. "Take this, you crazy bastard," cried Naruto as he kicked the man right in his face, knocking him and several of his teeth to the ground in a heap. The blonde stepped hard on the man's right hand, shattering some of his bones and stopping his light sword in the process. "Now tell me," demanded Naruto as he pulled the man up by his clergy clothes. "How the hell can you just mutilate and torture a random man like that?" The white-haired man grinned and spat on Naruto's face. "Fuck you, it is my job to kill all you devils and devil worshippers." The man tried to kick Naruto from below, but the blonde could see his every move with his eyes and stomped on his leg to stop him. "Let me go and let me kill you," cried the man crazily. Naruto shook his head at the man as he gripped his blade in one hand. "I am bringing you back with me, and I assure you that my master will give you a proper judgment." Just as Naruto was about to knock the man out with the handle of his blade, someone stood at the entrance of the room. "Ah!" cried a very familiar voice. Naruto looked up and was in shock when he saw Asia Argento standing in front of him with her eyes wide in horror. The young nun was dressed the same way she was a day ago, but her face was becoming paler as she looked at the destroyed corpse of the ground. Naruto looked at the younger blonde with a little shame in his eyes. Despite being shocked that she was here, he didn't want the innocent girl to see such a horrid scene. The white-haired man saw that Naruto was in a daze, and with a smirk he kicked Naruto right in the crotch and followed up with another kick to send him to the ground. The man forced himself up despite the many injuries on his body and pushed Asia to the wall. "You dumb bitch," cried the man as he slapped her across the face. "Where the fuck were you when I was getting beat up?" Asia had tears in her eyes as she cradled herself on the ground. Fried senpai." The newly named Fried grunted as he used his heavily wounded right hand to grip his light sword. "Get the damn head in the game and ignore that useless son of a bitch on the ground, just help me kill the damn devil." Asia looked over at Naruto who got back on his feet and Naruto-san. Naruto looked down at the ground as Fried chuckled. "Oh, you know each other already?" asked a man with an annoying laugh. "But I bet you didn't know that this handsome young man was actually a devil." Asia looked shocked as she stared up at her fellow blonde. "And Naruto-san is a devil." Naruto lowered his blade and looked at the girl apologetically. "I'm sorry Asia-chan, I didn't mean to hide it from you, but it is not something that I can just say to everyone." Fried chuckled and shook his head. "That's enough talking," cried the man as he grabbed Asia and held her in front of him with her blade at her throat. "I need to get out of here and you are going to help me." "What are you doing, Fried-senpai?" cried Asia and fried as she felt Fried's blade cut her neck a little. Naruto was beating himself up inside for letting the man catch him off guard. "Fried, you coward, let her go and fight me alone." Fried chuckled as he slowly licked the side of Asia's face, making her cringe in disgust. "No thank you, I don't want to be killed by a devil, especially not a pathetic devil like you who would actually care about a little nun on our side." The white-haired man's blade was very close to Asia's jugular vein and Naruto saw it all with his eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry little girl, but apparently this devil really cares about you and would let me go if I use you as a shield." Fried looked over at Naruto with a casual smirk. "So yeah, if you come any closer I will kill her, you will kill me afterwards, but having someone as pretty as her die with me is a pretty good way to go." If it was a normal situation, Naruto would have called the man's bluff, since if he really did kill Asia, he would lose his only bargaining chip, but the blonde deduced that Fried was just a psycho and would actually go through with what he said, so his will was wavering. "Fine, just go," muttered Naruto lowly with his eyes barring into Fried's own. Fried chuckled and jumped around a little giddily with Asia in his arms. "Oh, you are such a stupid devil," cried the man with a roaring laugh as Asia cried where she stood. "I want to have some more fun with you." Fried suddenly kneed Asia in the back and almost broke her spine in two. "Ah!" cried the girl in pain as some blood leaked from her mouth. Naruto almost ran forward for her, but stopped when he saw Fried still had his blade against her neck. "Damn you, Fried." The blonde promised himself that he would not hesitate to kill the man once he got the chance. Fried laughed and jumped around again as he pulled Asia back a little. "Now, if you don't want to see little Asia-chan here hurt anymore, stab yourself through your leg." Naruto just continued to glare at the man and didn't move, but was shocked when Fried kneed Asia again. "Stab yourself." Naruto gritted his teeth and was about to stab himself through the leg, but someone grabbed onto his arm. "Kiba," whispered Naruto surprised at his blonde friend's smile at him. The blonde noticed the red magic circle that formed behind him and was relieved when he saw Issei, Kaneko, Akeno, and Rias walk out of it and into the room. Kaneko had a worried look on her face as she walked over to Naruto to see if he was alright, to which the man just nodded with a small smile. This sure is interesting," said a carefree Akeno as she stood beside Naruto. Issei walked up and stood beside Kiba as he looked at the corpse on the ground. "Holy shit," cried the young man as he covered his mouth with his hands. Rias stood next to Naruto as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you alright, Naruto?" Naruto looked over at his master and nodded. "Hi, but you." "Rias-san," exclaimed an injured Asia in Fried's arms. "You're a devil too." The red-haired beauty nodded at the girl with her hands on her hips. "Yes, we are devils." "Hahaha," laughed a delighted Fried. "All the devils are here in one place, I am very lucky tonight." Suddenly, a blast of red and black fire rushed towards Fried and forced him to jump back along with Asia in his arms. Looking at the source of the attack, the man saw Rias holding her palm out towards him with a scowl on her face. "You should just disappear, exorcist," muttered the beauty with a dangerous edge in her voice. "You tried to hurt my handsome knight and I will make you pay for that." A powerful red aura started to shroud around Rias as she glared at Fried with her glowing red eyes. Naruto looked at his leader in surprise. "But you." Fried staggered back a little at the oppressing power Rias was emitting. "You are the real deal, maybe I should leave when I have the chance." At that moment, a purple wormhole opened above Fried and he felt a sudden rush of relief surge through him. "Phew, when I thought I would have to fight me way out of this mess." Kaneko frowned as she stood next to her leader, fallen angels several of them. "What should we do, but you?" asked Akeno with her casual voice. Rias sighed as she crossed her arms. "The main objective is to bring Naruto back, so we should leave and avoid having a full confrontation with the fallen angels in the middle of this large neighborhood." The red-haired beauty looked at her queen. "Akeno, prepare a jump for us." "Hi, but you." Akeno stretched her arms out in front of her and started to form a magic circle in front of them. Naruto's eyes widened as he tried to step up. "No wait," cried the man loudly. "We have to bring Asia back with us." The blonde looked over at the girl who had tears in her eyes as she stared at him. Naruto wanted to bring her back with him so she would be safe. Rias closed her eyes and crossed her arms. "I want to bring her back as well, but this spell will only work on people of my peerage, she won't be able to jump with us, even if we manage to get her back." Naruto's eyes widened as he looked back at the girl. "Asia." Asia had tears in her eyes as she shook her head. "I'll be okay, Naruto-san," muttered the girl as she forced a smile on her face, despite the tears falling from her eyes. "We'll see each other again." The red energy of the jump spell started to rise from the ground and cover most of Naruto's body, but his eyes were still barred against Fried. "If you harm one hair on Asia's head, I will completely destroy you." Fried just chuckled and started to wave goodbye at the group. "Bye-bye." The last thing Naruto saw before he was fully transported from the area were the soft green eyes of the innocent nun he had come to see as a little sister, which were filled with tears and void of any hope. "Wait for me, Asia-chan, I will come save you." Naruto had a small blush on his face as he felt Ria's blush against his back as her arms tenderly wrapped themselves around his chest. The beauty's delicate warm breath was lightly hitting against the top of his back as her cheek rested on his shoulder and her firm and slender body rubbed against his as she channeled her energy through him. So this is how she healed me the night I was attacked by that fallen angel, thought the blonde as he tried to ignore his obvious arousal that was dangerously pointing outwards. If Riaz was to look over his shoulder, she would have a very clear view of his manhood, and the thought of that made Naruto all the more aroused. "Are you feeling better now?" asked Riaz with a gentle whisper as she lightly rubbed her face against her knight. Naruto nodded with a blush on his face. "Yes, I wasn't exactly in terrible shape after all that," said the blonde with the calmest voice he could muster. "But my bruises are almost all gone now." The delicate aroma of Ria's perfume filled his senses as an image of a naked Riaz lying in a bed of strawberries blasted into his mind. Naruto had seen Ria's nude body a few times already, and thanks to his superior memory, the beautiful image would always pop into his mind when they were close. "Wow, your heart is really going," whispered Riaz softly as her breath tickled his ear. "Are you sure you are feeling alright?" The red-haired beauty's hands delicately traced Naruto's chest as she fully pressed herself onto him, and despite being completely innocent in her gestures, Riaz was happy that she had such an incredible influence on him. Riaz, whispered the blonde as his breathing quickened. I should be fine now." "Okay," whispered back Riaz as she pulled away from her knight, "but make sure to tell me if you are feeling ill." Naruto quickly pulled on his boxers before he tried to dress in his uniform as quickly as possible. The blonde was getting a little bit used to Riaz being so friendly with him, but no matter how many times he saw her nude body, he would always have a carnal urge to ravish her to his liking. Naruto was a teenager, and his innocent nature was effectively being suppressed by his newly developed urges after becoming a devil. The blonde walked out to the main area of the club room and joined the rest of Ria's peerage on their usual couch. Naruto took his usual seat next to Akeno and Kaneko and looked ahead to see Issei and Kiba enjoying some light snacks. It had been a very long night and it was almost daybreak, so the group decided to just hang out in their club room instead of going home, and Naruto quickly agreed since he was still too hyped up to go home to his human family. "You're quite strong, Naruto-kun," chirped Akeno with her usual sweet voice. "That exorcist looked quite powerful, and you defeated him by yourself." Naruto gave his beautiful friend a small smile and shook his head. "I didn't really defeat him, if I did Asia wouldn't have been taken by him." Riaz walked out of the curtains with a sigh. "Naruto, you can't beat yourself up because of that," said the red-haired beauty as she crossed her arms together. "Asia is associated with the fallen angels, and you are a devil, so it is best that you don't become any closer to that girl." Ria's tone was iron and left no space for argument, so Naruto only nodded his head. "It may only be one exorcist tonight, but if you try to do that again, it may be several fallen angels, and you will not be able to handle them." But you," whispered the blonde with his head down as he cursed himself inwardly. Akeno felt oddly sympathetic for Naruto and gently wrapped an arm around his shoulders, making the blonde look at her in surprise. "Akeno-san. You make care of that girl," Naruto-kun started, the queen of the group. "But trying to save her from so many fallen angels would be too much for you alone." Akeno leaned closer to Naruto until her breath tickled his ear. "I can help you train if you want to." Riaz narrowed her eyes at her best friend and felt oddly jealous at the sight of Akeno being so close to Naruto. "Akeno, we have our own duties to do." Akeno pulled back with a smile on her face. But you sounds angry." Naruto sighed and just closed his eyes to calm his mind. The past few hours had been too crazy and he needed to relax to relieve himself of the stress. True to his assumption, after a few hours of helping his usual patients under an overpass really helped Naruto forget about his troubles from the previous day, and he felt much better after his mind faded out everything except for his medical knowledge. But as Naruto walked back towards his own part of town, the thoughts of Asia and the fallen angels once again filled his mind with hundreds of imaginative situations. "I have to become stronger," exclaimed Naruto inwardly as he tightened his fist at his side. "If I was stronger and more alert, then Asia wouldn't have been taken away." Naruto knew that he was strong enough to defeat Freed if he ever run into him again, but he was still not sure if he could handle one fallen angel alone with the situation called for it. He had blasted one fallen angel away the night he awakened his sword, but according to Riaz, that was one of the weaker fallen angels, and he needed to become stronger if he wanted to truly defeat a strong fallen angel. The blonde could still remember the power that coursed through his body when he was first attacked by the angel who targeted Issei. It was incredible, and he felt like he could do anything. But for some reason when he awakened his devil powers, his power didn't feel nearly as powerful as before, and it felt different. Naruto wanted to truly figure out his powers, and he had a feeling that when he can control it, he would be able to defeat the strong fallen angels. "Naruto-san," said a sudden and gentle voice from behind the young man. Naruto stopped to turn around, and he was shocked when he saw Asia looking at him wearing her nun attire. The girl looked fine and had a small smile on her face, which made Naruto absent-mindedly exhale a breath of relief. "Asia!" cried Naruto as he ran over to the girl and wrapped his arm securely around her frame. The blonde girl was shocked at his actions, but felt very warm and protected in the arms of the taller blonde. Asia was very happy that she had someone who cared so much about her, and even though she knew that Naruto was a devil, he was one of the kindest men she knew. Naruto-san, whispered the girl as she looked up at the man. Naruto pulled back with a big smile on his face. Thank goodness you're alright, I thought you would have been hurt after they took you back. Asia shook her head. No, I'm fine, said the girl a little comprehensively. I'm on a break, so I decided to take a walk around town, then I saw Naruto-san, so. The blonde smiled sadly at the girl as Ria's words echoed in his mind, but ultimately he wanted to spend some time with Asia before they actually parted forever. Come with me, Asia-chan, I'll give you a tour around town. The innocent girl had a bright smile on her face as she followed her friend all over town, having fun no matter where they went. Naruto brought the girl to the video arcade and taught her how to play Dance Dance Revolution, and she turned out to be a much better dancer than he had expected. But the highlight of the arcade was the sticker photo booth, where they made silly faces at the camera as they printed enough photos for 20 wallets. Teaching Asia to eat her first cheeseburger was also a very amusing experience for Naruto, especially since the girl looked utterly adorable when he was staring at the large sandwich without any idea how to begin eating it. Asia instantly fell in love with the meaty sandwich and looked pretty embarrassed when she got ketchup and breadcrumbs all over her face, but Naruto just laughed it off and wiped the sauce off of her face. Though it was probably not a very good idea, Naruto brought Asia to watch a scary movie, and since it was the first movie Asia had ever watched, it was extra frightening for her. The poor girl had to use Naruto's arm to block her eyes from the scene of the movie, and the blonde had a field day chuckling at his adorable friend that he came to see as another little sister. Naruto had more fun watching Asia and eating his popcorn than watching the cliché movie about a haunted house. The two blondes finally settled down on a park bench after hours of continuous fun, and Asia had a bright smile on her face as she swung her legs around casually. Naruto smiled as he patted Asia's head. After we rest, I'll bring you to a nice restaurant for dinner, I'm sure you would love it there. The girl smiled and nodded happily. Okay. Replied Asia as she looked at the bag of medical supplies that Naruto carried around with him every day. So Naruto-san, how are things going with your patients? Naruto smiled and nodded. Things are going good, I managed to find enough vaccines for the entire east end of town, and all I have left is the north end. Asia smiled excitedly and sat up higher, that amazing, Naruto-san. The blonde young man smiled and patted her head again. I have nothing on your ability, you are the real magic healer out of the two of us here. Asia blushed a little at the praise, where did you even get your powers anyway? The blonde girl smiled a little sadly as she looked down at her hands. My parents abandoned me when I was a baby and left me at a convent in Europe, and I grew up there as a child, started the girl as she looked up at Naruto. I didn't know that I had powers then, but when one day a wounded puppy came into our convent, I prayed as hard as I could for his health, and out of nowhere I activated my powers and healed it completely. Naruto nodded along as his friend continued her story. After the church found out about my powers, I was sent to a much bigger church, and I spend my days healing diseases and lifelong wounds from God's followers. Naruto smiled at the fulfilling lifestyle that he planned to pursue once he had his medical degree. But that was when things began to change. What happened? Asked the young man softly. Asia looked up at Naruto with a sad expression. One day I found a wounded man lying in front of the church, and since I was the healer of the church, I ran out to help him get better, said the girl as Naruto nodded along at her words. I managed to heal him completely and he was back on his feet, but I got into a lot of trouble because that man turned out to be a devil. Naruto's eyes widened as he looked down at the girl. A devil? Asia nodded as she twiddled around with her hands. Hi, and when my church found out that I healed a devil, they kicked me out and branded me as a heretic. The girl had a sad smile on her face as she turned to look back up at the man. I was sent away from Europe and to Japan, and when I got here I was ordered to go to the town church to work as a nun. That's when you were sent to work for the fallen angels, muttered Naruto softly as he placed his arm around Asia's shoulder. The girl nodded and looked down to the ground. Yes, but even so I was very grateful that God was so kind to me, whispered the blonde softly. Even though I never knew about the terrible things the fallen angels were doing, Naruto looked at the girl sadly as she looked back up at him. Maybe God is still testing my faith. Naruto closed his eyes as he shook his head. I do know that God exists now, but where the hell is he? Cried the young man angrily in his mind. If he really is the all-powerful and loving father, then why are good people like Asia treating so badly? If I were him, I would make sure that someone as innocent and true as Asia would forever be in the light and happiness. But I still have faith, and when I overcome this ordeal, he would certainly make my dream come true, whispered the girl as she smiled softly to herself. Naruto shifted to face Asia fully. What is your dream? Asia sent Naruto a bright smile as she spoke. I'll make a lot of friends. exclaimed the girl, surprising Naruto quite a bit. Together we'll buy flowers and books and chat. Naruto smiled softly at the girl as he scooted closer to her. That is my dream. Asia held mountains of emotions inside her eyes as she looked at Naruto. I don't have any friends, you see. Naruto couldn't resist any longer and quickly pulled Asia into a tight hug as he held her head to the crook of his neck. Don't be silly, Asia-chan, I am already your friend. Ria's Butchu is already your friend. Soothingly said the blonde as he ran his hand through Asia's hair. From now on, we can all buy flowers and books together and I'll chat with you every day for as long as you'd like. The girl had tears welling in her eyes as she grabbed onto Naruto's sleeves as he hugged her. Naruto-san. I know that we haven't known each other for long, whispered Naruto softly to the girl. But you are already like a little sister to me and I want you to be happy. Asia stiffened at Naruto's words and felt an insurmountable surge of joy possess her entire being. She wrapped her arms tighter around the kind and loving man and cried into his chest. The girl had always wanted family and friends and she found both of them in Naruto. He was her best friend as well as her loving and protective older brother. Come back with me and abandon those fallen angels. Exclaimed Naruto seriously as he held Asia tighter, which made her stiffen again in his arms. I know this is literally a devil trying to persuade you, but you have to trust me on this one. I would never do anything to hurt you, Asia-chan. Asia looked up at Naruto with her teary eyes. You mean go back to you and Ria-san? Naruto nodded with a kind smile. Yes, Butchu is very powerful and I know that she would be able to protect you from the fallen angels. The man pulled back a little to fully look down at the girl. We all will be your friends and family and I promise you that you will be a happy girl for the rest of your life. The girl was silent for a long while before she smiled up at the young man with a nod. Okay, I'll go back with you. The blonde smiled and held Asia's shoulders tenderly. Great, then let's g. A sense of foreboding suddenly rushed through Naruto's senses and he instinctively turned around to see if anything was going to harm him. The blonde's eyes widened at the sight of a winged figure standing in the middle of the lake with her arms crossed and he instantly recognized her as the woman who killed him and Issei the night Rias revived them. Ernell-sama. Said Asia with a shocked look on her face. It's you, started the fallen angel with a smirk on her face. I thought the devil woman would have just left you there to die, but it seems that she has quite the courteous heart. Rinal sighed as she shook her head at the blonde man. You are such a handsome young man, too bad that Grimmery girl already took you into her peerage, if not I would consider having some fun with you. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the woman and stood in front of Asia. Cut the crap, I am not going to let you take Asia away again. Rinal shook her head again as she placed a hand on her hip. Sorry, but Asia here is a very useful person and I need her back with me. Asia held her hands to her chest as she stepped forward. I will not go back with you, I will never work for someone who makes me kill people. The girl turned to Naruto apologetically. I'm sorry, but in truth I ran away from the church today. Naruto smiled and nodded. I assumed as much, a kind and loving girl like you will never willingly work for something like them, said the young man as he turned back and sent Asia a wink. Don't worry, I will do everything I can to protect you from her. The fallen angel started to laugh as she created a light lance in her right hand. A low-class devil like yourself shouldn't speak so confidently, you will never be able to defeat me the way you are. Rinal pulled her lance back as it crackled with energy, just die. With that the fallen angel threw her lance straight towards Naruto at blinding speeds. The blonde had foresaw what the woman would do by analyzing her muscle movement and stepped to the side to avoid the lance with ease. The light weapon crashed into the ground and exploded upon impact, which sent Asia screaming as she threw herself to the ground to avoid the blast. Naruto glared at the fallen angel as he unsealed his blade and held it in his right hand. Stay away from us. Cried Naruto as he ran towards the fallen angel at full speed and aimed a slash to her side. Rinal smirked and wrapped herself protectively with her wings, which blocked Naruto's attack effortlessly. The woman had to say that the blonde was quite fast and she would have trouble keeping up with him, but she had her strong wings around her, so it was no problem. Naruto jumped up to strike an attack on the top of Rinal's head, but was utterly frustrated when his slash was blocked by another light lance that she made. It seemed that his attacks were not having any effect on the fallen angel's light weapons, and that was most likely because of his devil-based powers, which were weak against light. Rinal smirked as her light lance grew in size until it was swelling with power. Get out of my way, you annoying insect. The fallen angel slammed her weapon down to the ground in front of her and used the splash damage to nullify Naruto's advanced speed. The blonde is sent flying backwards towards Asia and he grunted in pain when he crashed into a stone pillar that gave way under the pressure of his heap of a body. Asia looked terrified as she quickly ran over to Naruto and started to heal him as much as she could. Are you okay, Naruto-san? Asked the girl desperately. Naruto grunted as he nodded and forced himself to stand. Yeah, I can still fight. Rinal formed another large light lance in her hands with a smirk on his face. Asia, if you want your hero to live then come back to me right now, or I will blast him into such small pieces that you will never be able to heal him. Asia looked as if she was giving up, but Naruto stopped her instantly. No, I would rather die than see Asia going back with you. Asia quickly grabbed onto Naruto's arm as he stood up on his feet, but was forced back by the man who didn't want her so near the battle. The fallen angel smirked. That can easily be arranged. Suddenly, Rinal was already hovering in the air in front of Naruto, and he instantly tried to run to the side to dodge the attack, but it was no use. The explosion of light was enough to catch up to Naruto and blasted him out of the small part and into some trees that broke upon his impact on them. Naruto-san, cried Asia as she started to run towards her surrogate older brother. Oh no, said an annoyed Rinal as she grabbed onto Asia's shoulder. You are not going anywhere, I need you with me until the end of the ceremony tonight. Let go of me, cried Asia as she thrashed around in the fallen angel's arms. Rinal slapped Asia in the face and silenced her completely. Shut up and come back with me, or I will kill that man right now. Asia's eyes widened as she clamped her mouth shut. Tears fell from her eyes as she looked over at Naruto who was greatly injured, and she knew that she had to go back with Rinal. Naruto pushed himself from the ground as many cuts bled his body dry. Asia, cried the man at the top of his lungs. Asia shook her head sadly as she sent a teary smile at Naruto. It's okay, said the girl as a pair of black wings wrapped themselves around her. I'll see you again, Naruto Naichin. Naruto watched on in shock and silence as Asia, along with the fallen angel, disappeared from sight. Once again, he had let Asia down by letting their enemies capture her, and he felt his heart tear itself apart from the guilt and shame he felt at the moment. I'm so sorry, Asisa-chan. The cold hard slap sounded through the room as Naruto's face is forced to the side by the usually soft hand of Rias, and the blonde looked back at his master with a blank expression. Naruto had officially explained the entire situation to Rias and voiced his need to rescue Asia from the fallen angels who resided in the town church. Rias reacted as Naruto had predicted and heavily stood against her knight's request and gave him a hard slap to send a clear message across. Kaneko looked concerned for the blonde young man as Kiba and Issei stood to the side silently. The argument between their king and her knight had turned the club room into a hive of tension and awkwardness, and nobody wanted to interrupt the two clashing members. Ria's words were absolute to her peerage, and if she said no, everyone would have to listen to her without question, but Naruto seemed very adamant. You are being irrational, Naruto, exclaimed Rias angrily as she looked at Naruto with authority. I will not risk the lives of my peerage to save a girl that is associated with several fallen angels. Naruto frowned and looked down at the ground. This is not possible, just forget about her. The blonde looked into Ria's stern green eyes with a strong expression of his own. I made a promise to Asia-chan, and I am a man of my word, said the man as he stepped up to a slightly surprised Rias. If I have to become a stray devil in order to save her then so be it, announced Naruto as he turned his back on Rias and started his way to the door. Naruto, cried Issei as he grabbed onto Naruto's arm. Think this through. Naruto looked back at the brown-haired young man with a small nod. I have thought this through, Issei whispered the man softly, while he felt slightly surprised that Issei was the one tried to stop him. I have spent my whole life trying to save the people around me, and I will not stop now. Suddenly Akeno walked into the room and headed towards Rias with a serious expression on her face. Naruto looked back at the scene with narrowed eyes as Akeno started to whisper something into Rias. With a nod, Rias started to walk out of the room as her eyes lingered on the distant eyes of her knight, which made Naruto shift his gaze to avoid her questioning look. An urgent matter came up, Akeno and I will be going now and Issei will be coming with us, said the president as she walked past Naruto. Issei was surprised that was going to go with the president and vice president, but seeing how the mood as to tense, he just walked up to them silently and stood beside them. Rias stopped just when she was about to walk out the door and looked back at the blonde young man with a blank look on her face. A knight will never be able to defeat so many fallen angels alone, so if you don't want to be killed, don't go to the church alone. With that, Rias, Issei and Akeno walked out of the room and soon they disappeared into the darkness. Are you going? Asked Kiba with a small smile on his face. Naruto smirked and placed his hands in his pockets. I believe Rias Butchu was very clear with what she just said the man as he looked back at the group through the corner of his eyes. So how much longer are we going to pretend that we are not going? Kiba chuckled and nodded. You are such a reckless person, but I believe that you are intelligent enough to think this through, so I'll come along to help. Naruto smiled before he turned to Kaneko. Are you coming with us, Kaneko-chan? The white-haired girl nodded emotionlessly. Yes, I would worry if only you two go. The blonde chuckled and nodded. Thank you. Naruto had been inside churches for a few times in his life, but never had he felt such powerful murderous intent before. The dark and abandoned building gave off a sense of foreboding, and the eerie atmosphere made the tension even more intense than before. The white moonlight shone past the broken glass windows of the church and casted long and frightening shadows off the destroyed statues around the large room. The large cross behind the altar was broken and its debris were scattered along the ground, which made the area oddly apt for a fallen angel main base. Naruto stood in the center of the group as Kiba and Kaneko covered his sides. The blonde felt much better with his comrade present with him, especially since Kiba had predicted that there were many priests in the building. Naruto summoned his sword to his hand and gripped it tightly as he walked down the aisle as silently as possible. Suddenly, everyone saw someone walk out from the side of the room. It was the same exorcist that killed one of their summonses a few days ago, Freed. "You know, I have never met a devil twice," said the white-haired man with a smirk on his face. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man. "Freed. I am strong, so when I usually meet you devils I would kill them on the spot," said the man proudly as he reached inside his robe. "But you managed to get away from me and that pisses me off." Freed pulled out his light sword and pistol, intending to fight Naruto and his friends. "So now I am going to pop a few headshots." That crushed. Kaneko reacted very quickly and threw a large church bench at Freed. But the man was not fazed at all and sliced through the bench with his blade easily. "You're one insolent midget," mocked Freed with an obnoxious grin on his face. Kaneko grew a tick mark on her forehead and continued to bombard Freed viciously with her benches, only to have the man slice them into pieces as they fell onto him. Kiba also took action and ran forward to Freed with his high speed, dodging the exorcist's bullets as he ran, and engaged him in close-quarter combat in front of the altar. Naruto was about to jump in to help Kiba, but his surroundings suddenly contorted into unrecognizable haze, and his ears fell silent to everything around him. "What are you planning to do?" asked a deep voice from within Naruto's mind. "Are you planning to jump into the fight only to be killed by the enemy?" Naruto tried to speak, but he found that his body was frozen on the spot and he couldn't move at all. "Please do not hold back anymore. I know that even with your blood tainted by the little devil girl, you should be much more powerful than this." Naruto recognized the voice as the same loving one who spoke to him the night Rias revived him. "You need to realize that these beings are your enemy and you have no need to hold back against them." "Who are you?" cried Naruto in his mind as he tried to move his arms. "I am the one being who knows you better than anyone, my son. I have been watching over you your whole life. I have finally gathered enough power to talk to you once again," said the deep and powerful voice calmly as Naruto's eyes widened at being called son. "I know that you have an incredible desire to heal all those around you and you have a love for everyone that exceeds most others in the world, but you must realize that these are not beings that need your healing." Naruto utilized all of his mental power trying to break the hold, but he was still frozen in his spot. "I am not holding back at all. Yes, you are subconsciously you are still inhibiting yourself from achieving your true power because your love for humanity is holding you back." The blonde was beginning to see what the voice was talking about. "Your love is a gift and a very powerful possession, but it is not directed towards everyone. You must learn to separate those who you must vanquish and those who you must protect, only then would you be able to unleash your suppressed power." "What suppressed power?" "You were supposed to gain your true power the night you died, but before you could fully perish, that devil girl suppressed the vast majority of your power within the small amount of human life you retained and locked it fully by giving you the powers of a devil," said the voice as Naruto's mind ran 100 miles a second trying to think of some logical answer to some of his questions. "Normally your powers would obliterate the devil girl's power, but she managed to revive you as her own at the split second that you were still a dying human and that allowed her to fully suppress your powers." Naruto wondered if Rias was somehow involved with suppressing his powers, but it made no sense whatsoever. "But I think it was a total coincidence since I couldn't sense anything from her except the want to revive you." The scene around Naruto shifted again and Naruto was given a very clear image of Freed and Renel. "What now? These are your enemies and you should have no mercy for them. The love that you were blessed with do not include them. You must learn to reward the righteous and punish the evil." The scene flashed to Naruto's memories of when Freed and Renel took Asia away from Naruto. "Even with your power suppressed, you should be able to destroy these two foes with ease. You are the one who is subconsciously holding back." Naruto felt his emotions grow intense again at the sight of his enemies and felt a growing power inside his body. The scenes kept repeating itself and he always shown the expression on Asia's face when she was taken away by Freed and Renel. Naruto felt a sense of desperation arise from within him as more power surged into his body. Naruto's vision and surroundings suddenly reverted back to normal and he saw that the situation in front of him was the same as before. It seemed that he was frozen inside his own subconscious and no time had passed since then. "I am not holding back." A sudden rush of anger and determination coursed through Naruto's body and he sped towards Freed as fast as he could. Freed. The exorcist was still having a fast battle with Kiba and he was not prepared for a sudden attack from a very fast Naruto. Freed's eyes widened in shock as Naruto's sword pierced his chest and tore through his heart. Kiba and Kaneko looked at Naruto in shock as blood spewed out of Fried's chest. They never expected Naruto to suddenly kill the man, but they both agreed inwardly that it was better off that the man was terminated as soon as possible. Naruto stared at the sight of Fried's pierced heart and pulled his blade out in one go. The exorcist fell to the ground silently and dropped his weapons to the side, the light grew dim in his eyes as his breathing ceased after a few more seconds. Naruto felt an enormous boost of power surging inside of him and it was growing by the second. The reality of killing Fried was very apparent to Naruto, but he did not feel the guilt or the regret of killing him. The blonde knew that Fried was an evil man who killed for leisure and he made the world a better place by killing him, it was a very simple truth. The blonde looked over at Kiba and Kaneko calmly. Let's continue, we have to get Asia out of here. Naruto heard some chanting below an opening that was behind the altar and quickly kicked it out of the way. A secret passageway was revealed to the group, Naruto quickly led the way down the long flight of stairs. The chanting grew louder and louder as the group descended down the stairs as quickly as they could and some flickering of yellow light lit up the end of the passageway. Naruto emerged from the end of the stairs and was greeted by the sight of a large room with countless priests in it. The blonde's eyes widened when he looked at the very back of the room where a flight of stairs escalated up to a raised platform. Asia was chained to a large stone cross in a small white dress with a green glow surrounded her small body. From where Naruto was standing, he could see that Asia's vitals were not looking good, especially her heart that was beating too slowly for her to be safe. The girl was already unconscious and if the situation continued as it was, she would never regain consciousness. "Welcome, Devil-san," exclaimed Rinal with a smirk on her face as she stood on the platform. Naruto growled in anger. "What are you doing to Asia?" Rinal smirked as Kiba narrowed his eyes at the scene. "I see," started the young man as he stood next to Naruto. "The fallen angel is trying to extract the girl's sacred gear from her body." Naruto quickly looked to the side at Kiba. "What will happen to Asia if she loses her sacred gear?" "She will die," said Kaneko in monotone while she looked at the scene. Some black energy started to seep into Asia's natural green energy and it shocked the girl ahead. Asia was crying out painfully despite being unconscious, as if her body was trying to ease the pain by sounding out vocally. Then a blast of light emerged in the room and Naruto watched on in shock as a pair of rings hovered in midair in front of Asia. The blonde girl's eyes grew dim and her breathing became increasingly faint. "Asia!" cried Naruto as he sped towards the scene as fast as he could. "Naruto-kun!" cried Kiba loudly as he and Kaneko followed after him. The priests were right in front of Naruto with their light blades and guns drawn, but the young man paid them no mind. With a slash, Naruto cut down the first priest that tried to stop him and continued on with his eyes locked onto Asia. There were at least 60 priests between Naruto and Asia and the blonde deemed all of them enemies as he plowed through them without mercy. "Aorta!" cried Naruto in his mind as he stabbed one priest through the large artery. Jugular. Blood spewed from another priest's throat. Heart. Naruto pierced another priest's chest and through the heart. Spine. Kiba's eyes widened at Naruto's efficient and merciless sword skills. Lungs. Kaneko looked a little worried for Naruto but remained focused on her enemies. Brain. Rinal looked surprised that Naruto had improved so much in such a short amount of time. One by one, Naruto skillfully killed off the priests and he finally saw a clear passage from where he was to where Asia was. Taking his chance, Naruto burst forward as fast as he could and made it to the top of the platform in a blink of an eye. Even Rinal was shocked at the speed Naruto now possessed and backed off a little in case he tried to surprise her with an attack. Ignoring the fallen angel for the moment, Naruto cut off the chains that bounded Asia to the cross and caught her in his arms when she fell. "Asia-chan!" cried Naruto as he held the girl securely to his chest. The blonde girl slowly parted her eyes and gave Naruto a very weak smile. "Naruto Naya-chan," whispered Asia as if she was happy that she got to see him before she died. "You're here." Naruto looked worried but forced a smile onto his face. "Hang in there, Asia-chan, I'll get you out of here." Asia felt her consciousness fade but nodded weakly nonetheless. "Hi." Rinal smirked from where she stood and crossed her arms. "You can take her if you want, I already got what I wanted." "Shut the fuck up, you bitch." Angrily shouted Naruto as he stood up on his feet. The blonde knew that he had to heal Asia as much as he could and he needed to do that away from the fallen angel. With a quick leap, Naruto jumped off of the platform and broke into a fast sprint as soon as he touched the ground. He quickly gestured to Kiba and Kaneko that their job was done and they should retreat, but they shook their head at him. "You go first, Naruto-kun," cried Kiba as he pushed another priest away. "We'll buy you some time to heal her." Kaneko nodded as she threw a large man into a wall. "Yes, we can hold them off for now." Naruto felt conflicted about leaving his comrades behind but started his way out of the room nonetheless. "Thank you, Kiba, Kaneko-chan." The blonde sprinted up the stairs as quickly as he could and gently cradled Asia to his chest. Naruto was closely monitoring Asia's condition, and things were not looking good at all. In all of his experience, Naruto had never seen anything so irrational. There was nothing he could see that was killing Asia, but no matter how things look, she was dying. Asia's heartbeat was getting weaker and weaker, and Naruto could see that her blood flow was starting to decrease, which made him speed up due to desperation. Naruto jumped out of the passage and quickly placed Asia down on one of the benches in the church. "Asia-chan," cried the man as he placed his hand softly on her cheeks. The girl's eyes weakly parted after hearing Naruto's voice and sent him a tiny smile. "Naruto Naya-chan," whispered Asia as she lifted her hands to touch Naruto's face. "Even though it was only for a short while, I'm very happy that I found an older brother." "What are you talking about?" started Naruto as tears welled up in his eyes. "We still have our whole lives ahead of us." Asia maintained her smile as she dragged onto Naruto's every word. "There are still all kinds of foods I have to show you, there are thousands of movies that we still have to watch together, there are hundreds of games I still have to play with you." Asia let loose a few tears of her own as she saw and felt Naruto's tears fall onto her hand. "There are still amusement parks, bowling alleys, and even casinos when we are old enough." Asia cried harder at his words, but still had a kind smile grace her lips. There is still more," exclaimed Naruto as she placed his own hand over Asia's on his face. "I still have to introduce you to my family." The girl's eyes slowly started to close, but she was trying to force herself to be awake. "My mother will love you very much, and my father would make sure to teach you all sorts of games," exclaimed Naruto as more tears flowed from his eyes. "Then there is my little sister, she is just an 8-year-old girl, and she would love to have you as an older sister." Asia's heart rate was incredibly low, and Naruto knew that she would die in a few seconds. "Stay with me, Asia-chan," cried the man as he started to use CPR on the girl's chest to keep her heart going. With the last of her strength, Asia lightly caressed Naruto's cheek with a smile on her face. Everything fell silent when Naruto saw Asia's heart stop beating with his eyes. The blonde held onto the girl's small hand in his own as tears continued to fall from his face. He wanted to keep her hand warm for as long as possible. Naruto hated the fact that there was nothing he could do to save Asia. Her vitals were failing on their own without any apparent cause, and even with his medical skills, he didn't know what to do. Why, Naruto thought silently with his eyes closed. Why did such a good person have to die? Asia was a kind and innocent soul who only thrived to heal everyone that needed help, and she didn't care if they were human, devils, or angels. Naruto felt his frustration skyrocket at the thought of God taking away someone so genuine and true away from a world that so desperately needed someone like her. Asia's whole life had been devoted to God, and despite her everlasting faith to him, she still had to die. Naruto looked back at a broken cross that stood at the center of the church. "Damn you, God," cried the man as he stood up to glare at the cross. "You claim to love everyone, but you are just a bastard who stands idly by while such a great person dies." Naruto's whole body shook as intense emotions filled his entire being to the brim. "I know you can hear me, and I know you are there, so you can destroy me now if you can." Tears continued to fall from his eyes. "You are just a hypocrite. Now you are beginning to sound like a devil," said the familiar voice of Rinal as she sat on one of the benches staring at Naruto. The blonde felt his rage increase at the voice of the fallen angel, and his fists were shaking violently. "That fellow knight of yours managed to hurt me a little," mockingly whimpered the woman as she gestured to a small cut on her arm. "But now that I have this, it doesn't really matter." Rinal used Asia's twilight healing to heal her own wound in under a second. "Amazing, no matter what wound, with this power I can heal it right away." The fallen angel smiled over at Naruto. "This is really important to me since as fallen angels, we no longer have the divine protection real angels have." "She could have lived a peaceful life," whispered Naruto softly while he looked to the ground. Rinal chuckled and crossed her arms together. "You are such a naive fool, sacred gears are too much for any human to handle," started the fallen angel with a smirk on her face. "Sacred gear users have always been outcasts among other humans." Naruto thought back to the lonely expression Asia would have occasionally and how she said that she had no friends or family. Humans are afraid of others with powers. This has always been the way, and it will continue to be that way. I was her friend and family, I could have made her happy. The fallen angel laughed boisterously. "Yet you couldn't save her, you failed her completely by letting her die, you are a failure as a friend to her." "I know," said Naruto clearly as he opened his eyes. "That is why I can't forgive either of us." A huge torrent of power surged out of Naruto's body as the ground around him cracked from the pressure. A gray aura surrounded Naruto like a giant flame, and it was flickering violently as he held his fists in anger. The entire church started to shake from the power Naruto was expelling, and the objects around him were forced backwards by a shockwave that his power created. The remains of the glass windows shattered, the benches of the church were shoved up against the walls, the cement floor was splitting into pieces, and Rinal was having a hard time standing on her 2 feet. Rinal backed off in shock as her eyes widened at the sight in front of her. What is this reaching the power of a high-class devil? The only thing that hadn't been affected was the bench that Asia was still resting on, as Naruto was subconsciously still protecting the girl from any sort of harm. Naruto summoned his blade to his hand and held it tightly in his grasp. The blade itself was glowing a very bright white light as its vibration sounded a stingingly high pitch into the air and it made Rinal feel catatonic. The fallen angel could explain her unusual sense of danger to Naruto's power, but felt as if she had felt something like it before and it was something that could obliterate her. Some of the rust that had corroded the blade started to disappear as the light shined brighter and brighter. "She was like a little sister to me," whispered the man as his hair hid his eyes from sight. "What the hell are you?" cried Rinal as she desperately tried to run or fly away, but her legs and wings were not responding to her. Naruto's blue eyes started to glow as his power continued to grow. All she ever wanted to do was to have some friends and a family, but apparently that was too much to ask for. The blonde looked at his blade and felt the power that coursed through him like a cleanser. "Vultures like you took advantage of her situation and innocence and took away her life in order to enhance your own. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight," said the voice again inside Naruto's mind. "So he put him to death." Naruto turned to glare at Rinal with untamed anger and slashed the blade across horizontally. "Disappear." The fallen angel watched on in horror as a giant crescent blade of grey energy blasted towards her and she cried out from fear. The large sum of power crashed into Rinal at full blunt and it obliterated her completely. Even after the grey energy swallowed the fallen angel, its momentum carried it on and it completely destroyed everything that was in its way. The cement floor was ripped out by the air pressure, the large wooden furniture were blown to dust and even the walls and the main door of the church were destroyed upon impact. Naruto stood motionlessly with his blade still extended as he looked at the destruction his attack caused, but also at the path that was forged. The righteous must be rewarded and the evil must be punished through the violence and death. A new path can be forged, thought Naruto as he stared at the pseudo-road he formed with his attack. From the death of Asia, Naruto learned a valuable lesson and it was the fact that perfection had never existed. Kindness should not be target towards everyone and while there is good, there will always be bad. He knew that he must differentiate between true kindness and evil and apply his kindness accordingly, only then would he be able to form balance. The structure of the church began to give in to the lack of support and the roof started to fall to the ground. The blast of red energy blasted the large piece of falling cement to pieces as several people appeared behind Naruto. Naruto ignored their presence for the moment and walked forward to reclaim a pair of rings that were floating in midair while exerting a green glow. They were the source of Asia's power, her sacred gear, Twilight Healing. The rings gave off an aura that was similar to their owner and Naruto closed his eyes to suppress the sadness that was overwhelming him. The young man silently walked over to the corpse of his surrogate little sister and knelt down in front of her. "These belong to you," Asia-chan whispered Naruto as he slipped the rings back onto her fingers. Ria slowly walked over to her knight and placed a soft hand on his shoulder. "But you," whispered Naruto softly as he maintained his gentle gaze at Asia. "I'm sorry after talking so big and with the help from everyone," Riaz frowned as she continued to listen to Naruto's words. "I still failed to save her." Riaz leaned down and wrapped her arms around Naruto. "You just lacked experience, no one will blame you for this." The beauty nuzzled her face against Naruto's as she spoke and it made Naruto feel a little bit better. "But there is still one thing that I can do for her." Naruto stiffened at the news. "What do you mean?" The Grimoire heiress made a chess piece appear in her hand. "I will try to resurrect this nun as a devil." The kendo appeared on the other side of the bench and transported Asia's body to behind the altar where the cement floor was still intact. A red magic circle formed around Asia's body as Riaz placed her bishop chess piece on her chest. "This has never been done before, but I am willing to give it a try," said Riaz, referring to resurrecting a nun instead of an ordinary human. The beauty started to speak out incantations as the red energy grew stronger and brighter and soon Asia's rings started to glow their usual green. Naruto's eyes widened when he caught a glimpse of Asia's heart move and after a few more seconds it regained its beat. The blood inside her body started to flow once again and her lungs were able to inflate again automatically. A smile involuntarily came onto Naruto's face as he looked down at Asia and it grew once he saw her eyes slowly part. The chess piece sunk into Asia's chest and her strength came back to her. Asia sat up slowly as if she had just woken up from a very deep slumber. "And Naruto Nai-chan." Naruto immediately sped over to Asia and hugged her tightly against his chest. "Asia-chan." The blonde cried as more tears fell from his eyes, but these were tears of joy. The girl's voice was still the same and from his eyes he could see that her vitals were as healthy as ever. Naruto pulled away to look up at Riaz with a smile. "Thank you so much, Riaz, but you." Riaz smiled back her knight. "I'm sure she will make a great bishop and she will be in your care, both as her senior devil and older brother." "Hi." cried Naruto as he held a smiling Asia in his arms. Hiba, Issei, Kaneko, and Akeno all had smiles on their face as they watched a heartwarming scene, and all of them were very glad that this entire ordeal was finally put to rest. I am sure you will do well, my son. Once again, the early morning sunlight broke through the curtains of Naruto's room and landed harshly on his eyes. The young man groaned softly as he wiggled around in his comfy and warm position and pulled the soft and warm source next to him closer to his chest. Naruto had a small smile on his face as he rubbed his face to the soft and supple mound in front of him, but was woken up even more when he heard a very familiar voice moan. Naruto's rational thoughts broke him out of the morning drowsiness and made him part his eyes to see what really was in front of him, but he quickly came to regret the decision. Right up against his face was the large and soft of Ria's gremmery, and her was pressed up against his cheek. A monster blush came onto the blonde's face as his breath quickened, but his stronger exhale stimulated Ria's other and made her moan in her sleep again. The blonde tried to pull away from the warm embrace, but he found that not only were his arms wrapped around his master, her arms were locked around him like a vice grip. The beautiful girl had a warm smile on her face as she pulled Naruto's head fuller against her chest and accidentally rubbed her large sensually against his face. Why does this keep happening to me? Thought Naruto to himself as he pulled his pelvis away from Ria's as much as possible so that he won't poke her with his arousal. Fortunately for Naruto, he was actually wearing rather thick pajamas because of the cold night, so the bare skin contact was not nearly as much as the first few times. Ria snuggled deeper into her pillow and pulled her source of warmth closer, once again rubbing her into Naruto's face. My goodness, this is the third morning Ria's has been sleeping next to me. It has been a week since Naruto had rescued Asia from the fallen angels, and his life had returned to normal for the most part. There were only two major differences. One of them was that Asia had officially moved into his home to live with his family, and so far it was going very well. Naruto was worried about convincing his parents to let Asia stay with them, but with Ria's powers, it was not that complicated. Now Naruto's family thought that Asia was actually a long-lost sister of Naruto that came to Japan to find him. It was a great cover story since it made sense, considering they both had the same shade of blonde hair and that they shared a blooming brother-sister relationship. Kurenai and Asuma had taken a huge liking to Asia and treated her like their own flesh and blood, but the one person who really started to love her was little Yuki. The little girl had always wanted an older sister, and she finally had one in Asia. The blonde girl had a great first week at home just playing around with the little girl, and Naruto had gotten used to seeing his two sisters smiling as bright as the sun around the house. The other change was Ria's attitude towards him, which became much more affectionate and friendly since the Asia ordeal. Naruto didn't really know why his master had suddenly taken such a liking to him, but he wasn't going to stop the woman he had feelings for from expressing her affections for him. Even though Naruto felt very embarrassed in most of their awkward and accidental nudity situations, he was still a healthy young man, and he enjoyed having such a beautiful woman snuggle next to him in bed. Honest to himself, Naruto felt very comfortable and relaxed when Rias would sleep next to him. The only downside was his awkward morning wood the morning after. "Good morning, Naruto," said Rias suddenly, which made Naruto jump in response. Naruto's widened blue eyes looked into Ria's soft green orbs. "Gee, good morning," Rias stuttered out the young man with a blush on his face. "How did you sleep last night?" The red-haired beauty smiled elegantly and nodded. "I slept great, there is just something about your bed that makes me sleep like a baby." Rias covered her mouth as she yawned and sat up fully on the bed, making Naruto's eyes follow her slightly bouncing dot. Naruto resisted the urge to groan at the sexy sight and rose onto his knees under the cover so his manhood wouldn't form a tent under the blanket. Rias was the most beautiful girl Naruto had ever seen in his life, and her body had become his most frequent and arousing fantasy. The fact that Rias usually slept naked next to him didn't help the blonde control his devilish teenage hormones, and he was afraid that one day he would be pushed over the edge. "So how is your arm?" asked Rias as she looked down at her knight. Naruto was broken out of his stupor and nodded. "It's fine now, I can't feel any pain thanks to Asia-chan." Since Naruto's incredible increase of power, Rias had spent most of her free time training him to control his new power, and it was going quite well. Naruto was not used to the huge amount of power running through his system, and he needed to adjust to it fully, but it was not too difficult to do. Rias and Akeno were masters at using their demonic energy, and even though they mentioned that Naruto's energy was like nothing they ever felt before, their lessons were still effective. Issei had also taken up training with them, since he managed to awaken more of his sacred gear when Rias and Akeno forced him to fight Rinal's partners during the Fallen Angels ordeal. Much to Naruto's surprise, Issei actually possessed an extremely powerful sacred gear, boosted gear, which was said to be able to take down even God himself when given enough time and resources. Issei had gotten stronger compared to when he first started, but he still hasn't managed to beat Naruto in a fight. The one thing that surprised Naruto though, was the fact that the others said that his new power was not like any they have felt before, it didn't feel demonic, angelic, or draconic. It was obviously very powerful, but the others were more surprised at the peculiarity rather than the raw power. The gray color suggested that it was some kind of hybrid power, but they still couldn't narrow it down to what it was. There was one thing that bothered Naruto a lot though, and that was how he could no longer hear the deep and powerful voice that spoke to him during the fight with Rinel. Rias had ordered Naruto to spar with Kiba once every day, and even though Kiba had much more fighting experience than Naruto, he was still losing almost every day. But Naruto had also suffered his own injuries in the fight, like his arm that got sprained the previous night, but with Asia as the bishop of the peerage, all the injuries lasted less than a minute. "That's good," happily said Rias with a smile on her face before she started to rub her belly. "I'm kind of hungry this morning, do you want to get some breakfast before class?" Naruto smiled and nodded. "Sure, I'll treat you today." "Sure," exclaimed Rias with a smile as she jumped out of bed. "Let's go back to the same place as last time, they had really good strawberry jam." The blonde smiled and nodded, but tried to pull his guilty gaze away from his Rias when she started to organize her clothes on his desk, which gave him a terrific view on her round and plump ass. It was the perfect heart-shaped form, and it looked very soft and supple to touch, just like her. "Hurry up and change, that place is already opened." Naruto sighed as he turned around and pulled his pants off. The blonde was still embarrassed, but he had changed a few times in front of Rias already, so it was not intolerable. The one thing Naruto needed to make sure of was that his back was facing Rias, since he would usually be erect when he was changing next to a naked Rias, and that he needed to change very quickly, but as if fate was playing tricks on him, someone knocked on his door. "Ani-chan," cried the voice of a happy Asia. The girl taken a liking to calling Naruto Ani-chan, since it was what Yuki called him, and she rolled off her tongue very naturally. "Oh shit," cursed Naruto as the door opened. Both Naruto and Rias looked towards the door as it opened and looked like a couple of deer caught by headlights. The blonde hair of Asia peeked into the room as the door fully opened, and the smiling face of the innocent girl was showcased to the two older teenagers, but it quickly turned into a look of horror and embarrassment. She saw her older brother only in his boxers, which were extended quite far in the front, and a completely naked Rias Butchu who had her clothes spread out across her brother's bed. "Asia-chan, this is not what it looks like," slowly said Naruto as he pulled his pants back up. The past 3 times Rias had snuck into his bed, he always managed to get her out of the house without anyone seeing her, but he didn't have such luck at the moment. "Oh, Ani-chan Butchu," stuttered the young girl as a huge blush came onto her face. Rias smiled at her bishop and gave her a wave. "Good morning, Asia, do you want to come have breakfast with us?" Asia covered her mouth with her hands as she nodded back at Rias. "Good morning, Butchu, what are you doing here?" The Gremory era smiled and walked up to Naruto. "I occasionally spend the night with Naruto, so you'll be seeing me sometimes in the mornings." Naruto just sighed at the poorly worded explanation and palmed his forehead. "Why you spend the night with him?" Even the eternally innocent Asia caught the implications of Ria's words and had an even darker blush on her face. Asia backed away from the door and started to shake her head. I'll leave the two of you alone with that." Asia ran down the hall and jumped back into her own room. Naruto sighed and quickly ran out to the hall when he remembered something. "Hey Asia-chan, it's your first day of school today, remember to bring everything." Rias giggled at his brotherly attitude and wrapped her arms around his own. "Don't worry about Asia too much, we'll meet her later in front of the school." The blonde smiled and nodded. "Sure, let's get changed and get a nice breakfast." "Alright," chirped Rias as she pushed Naruto back into the room. "Oh, it's a blonde beauty," cried one of Issei's friends with a blush on his face. The other member of the perverted trio tilted high glasses, bust 82 centimeters, waist 55 centimeters, hip 81 centimeters, "Good," cried the man without seeing Issei waving his hands in the air, desperately trying to tell him to stop whatever he was doing. Naruto smiled as he looked at his sister from the back of the room in his usual seat, it seemed that Asia would fit in quite nicely with the others in class. The blonde had to admit that Asia looked quite fitting in their school uniform and looked like a cute girl just starting her life in high school. In the end, Naruto was very happy about how things turned out for Asia and was happy that she achieved her dream in having lots of friends and a family. "I am new in Japan, but I am staying with Naruto Naichin right now, so hopefully I can fully adapt soon," chirped the girl as the entire class looked over at one of the 2 handsome blonde princes of the school in shock. Everyone automatically linked up the 2 as real siblings because of their matching blonde hair, which was very rare in their town. "Asia-chan is my sister," said the seldom heard voice of Naruto as he glared over at the perverted trio. "And if any of you guys try to hit on her, we are going to have a huge problem," finished the man with an icy cold voice that made Issei and his 2 friends sweat a little. Asia giggled at her brother as she walked to her intended desk, and she was surprised when a few other girls walked up to her with smiles on their faces. She was a little nervous about talking with them since it was really her first time associated with high school students. "Hello Asia-san, it's really nice to meet you," chirped a girl with long brown hair. The black-haired girl nodded along with her friend with a smile on her face. "You have such beautiful hair." Asia blushed at the friendly compliments and only nodded. "Thank you very much, it's nice to meet you too." "So you're Naruto-kun's sister, huh?" asked the brunette. "It must be nice to have such a strong and protective brother to watch over you." The blonde girl nodded happily. "Hi, Ani-chan is really good to me." The black-haired girl nudged Asia lightly with a smirk on her face. "So can you please tell me if your brother has a girlfriend, for not I and many other girls really want to know." Asia blushed at the mention of Naruto's girlfriend since it reminded her of the scene earlier in the morning. I think Ani-chan and Ria's Butchu are dating each other." Loud squeals of joy and some of jealousy erupted in the classroom and Naruto only looked over to wonder what on earth were Asia talking about with the other girls. Naruto sighed as he faced the blank canvas in front of him as 50 other people started to move their brush alone, their soon-to-be painting. The blonde usually had a good imagination and was quite good in art class, but he couldn't think of anything that he would want to forever place on his canvas. The teacher had told everyone in the room to think of the most beautiful scene they could imagine and try to depict it on paper, and it was much harder done than said. Asia was sitting next to Naruto while Issei sat in front of him and the two of them had already started to paint. But Naruto was still at a loss and couldn't help but think back to the reason why he had to paint in the first place. Flashback on. Once again, Naruto was in the club room with the rest of Ria's peerage and that included Asia, who had a smile on her face after a good first day at school. The blonde girl had already made several good friends with the other girls in class. While Naruto was very happy that his sister had a good day, but he couldn't share the same sentiment since people had started to talk about him and Ria's again around the school and it was even more exaggerated than before. "Can you please hand up the flyers, Akeno-san?" asked Naruto kindly with a slight sigh. The blonde was alone with the queen of the group for the moment since Asia followed Rias and Kaneko around the old schoolhouse for a tour. The black-haired beauty smiled and shook her head. "There is no need, but you decided that you guys are done with handing out flyers." Naruto was surprised, "Really?" Akeno smiled kindly and nodded. "Yep, it is time for you guys to get your own familiars." The beauty walked up to Naruto and placed her hands gently against his chest with a rubbing motion. "I agree with her, of course," whispered the girl close to Naruto's lips. "You've gotten so much stronger since you were first resurrected as a devil." The blonde blushed heavily at the close quarter since he wasn't as close to Akeno as he was to Rias, but she was just as beautiful and sexy. From the feels and looks of it, Akeno was even more endowed in the chest area than Rias and she was having fun rubbing herself against him. "You were so heroic when you fought against that fallen angel for little Asia-chan," whispered the girl huskily as her hands brushed a part of Naruto's bangs out of the way. "Any more things like that then I might end up falling for you as well." Akeno-san stuttered out Naruto as Akeno's lips started to inch forward to his own. "Akeno!" exclaimed a loud and authoritative voice. "What are you doing?" It was Rias who called out to the two and she had a stern expression on her face with her hands on her hips. Asia and Kaneko were also behind the president and the former had a blush on her face, seeing her brother might have another thing for Akeno. "Nothing," said Akeno calmly with a smile on her face. "I was just getting to know my cute underclassmen a little better." Naruto blushed at her words and only silently looked down on the ground in response. Rias walked up to her desk as her eyes stared into her best friend's own. "Whatever, just get seated and I will explain to Naruto and Asia about getting their familiars." Issei and Kiba walked in at that moment and also seated themselves onto the couch and the former already knew that he would also be getting a familiar with the others. "So what is a familiar?" asked Naruto as he looked over at the president. Rias smiled as she leaned back against her desk with her arms crossed. "I already explained this for Issei, but a familiar is a companion for a devil that carries out small tasks for them." A small bat appeared next to Rias, hovering over her shoulder. "I use my familiar to handle my summoning flyers and when you have yours, you will use them that way too." Naruto and Asia nodded as Akeno stepped forward. "They are very useful, let me show you mine." The black-haired beauty pointed a finger at the ground as a small magic square appeared and a small green imp appeared. "And this is Shiro-chan," said the stoic voice of Kaneko as she held a small white cat with a bell around its neck. Asia smiled brightly at the small creatures. "They are all so cute." Rias smiled at the innocent girl. "You'll get yours soon, Asia, we'll go to the familiar professor tonight." Before the conversation could go any further, some knocking was heard from the other side of the wooden double doors and before long it was opened. The light from within the room revealed the dark figures outside of the room and many people were surprised to see the mass of the student council walking into the room silently. The young woman leading the way was a very familiar face to Naruto, as he had associated with her a few times because of him being the top student of the school. She was the student council president, Shitori Sauna. The people who followed behind her were all from the student council, including the new student council secretary. Sauna-san? Asked Naruto, which surprised the others since they were not aware that he already knew the young woman. The student council president gave Naruto a small smile. Hello Uzumaki-kun, it has been a while since we've spoke. Rias looked over at her knight curiously. Do you already know each other, Naruto? Sauna decided to answer. I've met Uzumaki-kun a couple of times before when he received the top student scholarship, but I never thought that the next time we met he would already be your knight, Rias. Issei's eyes widened and pointed over to the other group. Why you mean that? Ikeno smiled and nodded. Yes, they are the other group of devils in our school, said the beauty as Naruto. Issei in Asia's eyes widened in surprise, her real name and Sona Satiri, the heiress to one of the largest devil families of the underworld. I never had the slightest clue, muttered Issei mainly to himself. The secretary scoffed from beside his master at the brown-haired young man. Really, you didn't even know that there were other devils in the school? Issei narrowed his eyes and sent the man a look. You aren't very vigilant, are you? Issei growled and stepped forward. Shut up you asshole, what the hell is your problem? Saji, behave yourself, this is not our own base. Said the president sternly, making her servant recoil back a little. Sona smiled at her childhood friend as she gestured to the young man next to her. Rias, this is my new pawn, Saji Genshiro. Rias smiled and nodded at Saji. Hello, and this is Mew new pawn, hi to Issei, my new bishop Asia Argento, and my new knight, Uzumaki Naruto. The red-haired beauty looked back at her own subordinates and gestured them forward. Go say hello. Asia smiled and stepped forward. Hello Saji-san, it's nice to meet you. Chirped the happy girl with a sweet smile on her face. Saji had an infatuated smile on his face as he used both his hands to shake Asia's own and was rubbing the back of her smooth hand. It's nice to meet such a beautiful young lady. Issei growled at the side and quickly grabbed Saji's with his own. It's nice to meet a fellow pawn, Saji. Exclaimed the young man as he squeezed Saji's hand as hard as he could. Saji groaned in pain but retaliated by squeezing back at full force. It is a shame to share the same title as a guy from the pervert trio. The two broke apart after another few seconds of squeezing each other's hands and maintained their glared at each other. It's nice to meet you, muttered Naruto stoically as he walked up to the Satiri pawn. Saji-san. Saji showed a lot more respect for Naruto instead of Issei because of his reputation as the smartest man in the school. It's nice to meet you, Naruto-san. Said the man as he gladly shook Naruto's hand. Naruto smiled a little before his expression turned icy cold. Yes, but let me warn you now, muttered the blonde softly. Stay away from Asia-chan, I didn't like the way you were touching her hand. Asia blushed at Naruto's overprotectiveness as Saji paled a little because of the knight's powerful aura and just nodded. Hi. Rias sighed and shook her head. I guess we both have to rough, don't we Sona? The Satiri heiress smiled and nodded. Yes we do, she replied back as she stepped closer to her friend. I just thought I'd come by to catch up, so what have you planned for your new pieces? The Grimoire heiress smiled. I am bringing them to get their familiars next week. Really? Asked Sona surprised. I was planning the same thing and he is only available once a month. Rias smirked at the chance to compete with her rival. Then how about we decide who gets to go with a fair game since we both have new pieces? What are you suggesting? Asked the student council president, a rating game. I won't be able to get permission for something like that, how about we let our new pieces compete against each other, it would be good training for all of them, suggested Rias with a smile. Sona crossed her arms with a smirk. What do you suggest? You two have two more new pieces than I do. You are the student council president, are there any new things they could compete at in school? Asked a red-haired beauty. The Satiri crossed her arms with a stern expression on her face. They won't be competing in the academic area since you have Uzumaki-kun on your side. Naruto smirked a little proudly at the mention of his flawless grades. How about something artsy? There is a painting competition going on in the art department tomorrow. Rias looked real interested and smiled. That sounds fun, let's have our pieces compete in the painting competition. Are you kidding but you? Exclaimed Issei as he looked at his master. I have no idea how to paint. Saji didn't want to, but he was basically on the same boat as Issei, so he nodded along with Issei as he looked at his own master. Don't worry too much about it, you don't have to win the entire competition, you only have to beat Saji-san in order to win, explained Rias with a smile on her face. If you all want to get your familiars then make sure to brush up on your painting skills tonight. Flashback end. Naruto looked around the crowded room trying to search for any sort of inspiration, and his eyes finally landed on a familiar sight outside the window of the classroom. Rias was looking into the room with a smile on her face, and it brightened when she saw Naruto looking over at her. The blonde easily returned a smile to the beautiful young woman and felt a peculiar feeling of joy swell up from his bottom on his heart. Riaz thought Naruto silently to himself as he turned back to his canvas. A surge of inspiration struck Naruto like a lightning bolt and his brush was gliding across the canvas confidently. A smile graced the blonde's face as the early stages of his intended painting emerged from the vast white space, and the warm red color was making him feel the ever more inspired. Naruto had used his powers to memorize the details of Ria's body down to the tiniest detail, and he made sure that his hands would follow a very precise and accurate pattern. Time passed by very quickly for Naruto as his mind solely focused on depicting Ria's perfect curves and intricate features on his painting. Naruto said the alluring voice of Ria's inside Naruto's mind. Naruto's personal favorite attribute of Ria's was her beautiful and elegant smile, the same one that he would see frequently in his dreams and the same one that was able to give him courage and hope, no matter what dire situation. The blonde loved the way Ria's soft and plump lips would curve up graciously and how her eyes would squint ever so slightly as she sent apparent affection to him. Before Naruto knew it, the time limit was already near its end, but he was finished. It was the most beautiful scene the blonde could imagine and one that he would like to forever place on paper. It was a scene of Ria standing in front of the old schoolhouse window, looking out onto the field with a smile on her face, and her hair was elegantly dancing in the light wind. "Naruto-san!" exclaimed the voice of the art teacher. "That is amazing." But the loud exclamation of the teacher, the rest of the class looked over at the scene in uniform and were at awe at the beauty of Naruto's painting. Ria's was so well drawn that it looked like an actual photograph of her, even the background was beautifully depicted. The blue sky, the green trees, and the elegant old school house were perfect decorations for the beautiful girl, and it made her even more perfect than usual. Asia and Issei looked at the painting in surprise as well, they didn't know that Naruto would be able to paint their master so perfectly. The blonde girl smiled at the sweet gesture, after all the teacher tasked them to draw the most beautiful scene they could imagine, and it showed that Naruto genuinely thought that Riaz was the most beautiful woman in the world. "I didn't know you were also such an outstanding painter, Naruto-san," cried the teacher proudly as tears streamed out of his eyes. "This is hands down the best painting done today, you are the winner of today's competition." Issei grinned as he immediately sent Saji, who was right in front of him, a victory sigh before he walked over to Naruto's painting along with the rest of the class. Naruto had a small blush on his face, as many others gave him compliments for his painting and kept saying how he was the most romantic boyfriend ever. It seemed that the rumors of him and Riaz would never go away, especially since his artsy and apparent devotion to her. "Oh, that is so romantic," cried a black-haired girl happily as she hugged herself. "Riaz Onasama is the most beautiful thing in the world for Naruto-sama," squealed another girl loudly. "I have got to learn how to paint," muttered one of Issei's friends as he stared at the infatuated looks of all the girls around Naruto. Naruto sighed to himself as the crowd around him continued to chatter on about him and Riaz, and it was beginning to annoy him, but suddenly everything fell silent. The blonde didn't know what was going on, so he looked back and he was surprised to see Riaz, along with Akeno and Sona, staring at his painting from behind the large crowd. Both Sona and Akeno had smiles on their faces as they saw the beautiful depiction of their best friend and was surprised by the amount of compassion Naruto had for his master. Riaz herself walked over to Naruto and looked at the painting directly over Naruto's shoulder. The blonde looked up at the beauty through the corner of her eyes and felt oddly nervous about a reaction to his painting, but was granted some relief when he saw a smile tweak up from her lips. It was the same one that he had on his painting and the one that he loved above all other smiles she had, it was the peculiar one she would have only when she was looking at him. "It's beautiful," Naruto whispered Riaz as she looked down at Naruto. "Thank you," whispered back the young man with a small blush. The entire class of 50 along with Akeno and Sona were looking at the two with interest, especially the people who were still wondering if the two were really dating each other. But almost everyone gasped when Riaz leaned down to Naruto and planted a gentle and chaste kiss on his cheek. Almost every girl around them squealed in excitement, but Naruto completely ignored the shriek that would usually annoy the hell out of him. Even the thoughts of getting familiars were banished from his mind, all he could think about was how soft Ria's lips felt against his skin and how happy he felt at the moment.